Okay, here we go. Now we're streaming. We're in Twitter Space. There's Dave. Clubhouse. We got Amay. Good morning, Amay. Or afternoon, in your case. Oh, Sarah's back.
Hi there.
Hello.
Missing all of you.
Hi everybody.
Hello, Messi.
How's Tyler today?
Yeah, not bad. Not bad at all.
Did you have a good sleep?
I woke up a little too early, so I'm feeling it.
When are you planning to fly to Stockholm, by the way?
Well, I scheduled the next event for March 23rd with Sequoia Capital.
Oh, so it was delayed.
For that. So as long as I'm there
That was
before March
delayed.
23rd, it should be fine.
Okay.
Hopefully we'll be all open up by then.
So India is delayed too.
Yep.
Omicron. Oh my god.
Yeah. Okay. So we got Matt. Welcome back, everybody. Right on time.
Welcome back.
Yeah.
I can't pin the link yet, by the way.
You can't what?
I cannot pin the link yet.
In what link?
Green bean.
Sure, you're already a must. Yeah,
You're already a moderator.
How come I can't see it on Club Deck? That's strange. Okay, I'll jump in again.
Okay. So I think we're ready. Anybody want to share something juicy before we do the big top 10 stories? Going once. Going twice. Too late. Here we go. Top story today, Thursday, January 27th. We're already nearly 10% of the way through 2022. Can you believe that? It just started and it's already near the end of January. That went fast. And Year of the Tiger is back.
Yep. February 1st will be the first day of the Lunar New Year.
Yeah, next Tuesday.
So, the first story today is from the Wall Street Journal. But I should say everybody's covering this story. And this story is interesting for a very different reason than it would first appear. And you very regular tech newsers will know what I'm referring to when I read this. So the Wall Street Journal's version of the headline is that Spotify is removing Neil Young's music after he gave the company an ultimatum between his music and Joe Rogan's podcast with COVID-19 vaccine misinformation. And okay, let's read several other of these headlines. Rolling Stone's headline is Neil Young demands Spotify remove his music over false information about vaccines. Okay, so Neil Young demands Spotify remove. New York Times says Spotify removes Neil Young's music after complaints about Joe Rogan. Oh, I see. Spotify decided to remove Neil Young's music after he complained about Joe Rogan. Oh, so they're retaliating against against Neil Young for complaining about their very expensive podcast that they spend $100 million for. Is that? Oh, that's what I'm supposed to.
No, Tyler. Their statement was they're honoring his request. That's it.
But the headline says something completely, totally different.
Yes, but it's correct that the official press release is, as you were just saying, whoever just said that. Yeah, they are honoring
That was
his
me.
request.
Yeah, they just said they're
Yeah,
honoring his request. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And he owns. I know you were talking about it yesterday. If you didn't go, he owns about 50% of his own. Well, exactly 50% of his own music, but he's in close collaboration and good relations with the people he sold the other half to. I know you were talking about this yesterday.
So the Hollywood Reporters had now, what I want to get into is the art of these headlines and how they can greatly completely give you completely opposite meanings in very subtle word choices. So the Hollywood Reporter headline is that spot now. And by the way, at the core of this issue is whose decision was this? Okay, that's what we're going to get into, and we will reveal the answer. But before we reveal the answer, listen to the headlines, and you decide based on these headlines who the publication is alluding as to who was calling the shots here. So the Hollywood Reporter says that Spotify to pull Neil Young's music after artists' objections to Joe Rogan. Now, if you just read that headline and you had no other context, like 99% of people, you would be correct in assuming that Spotify's upset with is retaliating against Neil Young for objecting against Joe Rogan, and so they're removing him from Spotify. That's what their headline says. That's what you should correctly assume from that headline. However, that is completely, utterly divorced from the reality of what is going on. Do you understand that? And by the way, it's not just the Hollywood Reporter's headline. It's the New York Times headline that I just read. It's nearly identical. New York Times, nearly identical. Spotify removes Neil Young's music after complaints about Joe Rogan. Oh, so he complained about Joe Rogan? So Spotify's removing him for complaining about Joe Rogan. As if implying that they're retaliating against him. Which is not at all what happened. At all. Not even close. Not even a little bit.
Totally crazy.
Do you see the problem here? So Rolling Stone, totally similar but yet totally different meaning headline. Neil Young, how different can this be? Neil Young demands Spotify remove his music. Oh, wait. What? That's the complete opposite of what the New York Times is telling me. That the New York Times is telling me that they're retaliating against him for complaining about Joe Rogan, and that's why they removed him. And then Rolling Stone says, no. Neil Young's demanding Spotify remove him. What? Which is true.
Hey, Tyler, I'm just
Yeah.
going to, for the maybe just sake of argument,
By the way, there's 60 other publications that are covering this. All of them have different versions
yeah,
in between
I
these
was
two
say,
spectrums.
but Tyler,
Yeah.
it could just come down to how many characters, how much type space, and they have other stories, and maybe the New York Times needed to cut off a certain number of letters because they needed more space to cover the potential war in the Ukraine. I mean, there's all sorts of reasons when you lay out like a, good remember, they still produce a physical paper too, or even if you did it just digitally. I mean, there are spacing issues about like where do you put this article versus that article, and how much space you need, and they probably alter headlines for no other reason than that.
No, hey Ken, I'll jump in on this, and I forget what it's called, and I'm gonna have to go look up the actual word on this. But a couple of the this came up several months ago in like God, the physicist room about words in journalism, and the examples they gave were like when you're doing investigative journalism versus doxing versus I forget what the other word was, and it really gives it a different flavor. And I'm gonna go actually look up what the theme is called, but it's something that Eric Weinstein was actually I guess getting on, and it's as Tyler's saying, it's about words and how they're framing it.
And also, I mean, Ken, I just wanted to chime in there, if I may, that in this case, that would be a totally lame excuse because at least they can look up the official press release, and even if they want to shorten it and shorten it and shorten it, it could still mean what actually is happening. And also, just wanted to add to Tyler, if you haven't seen the Forbes headline as well, with social media are saying that who is no Neil Young, this kind of negative.
Okay. So I got to just, for the sake of full transparency here, um, because I have minor connections to both camps in this case. Spotify's CEO speaks at my events and has been very supportive of my events in the past. and we've even gone to the gym on occasion together, and we might, I support his events each year that he puts on a fantastic event with one of my dearest friends, um, and as Sarah well knows, and
Ash.
yeah, Ash, who comes in this room regularly, as you guys know, is he and Daniel Ek produce an incredibly intimate, exclusive event every year that I am very honored to be part of. And the what else can I say? Neil Young's manager, Elliot Roberts, nearly was my band's manager. He also managed Bob Dylan for a while, and Elliot was Neil's manager from the entirety of Neil's career until Elliot died a few years ago. And Elliot's one of the best people in the music business ever had, honestly. And anyway, so again, I have loose connections to both somewhat equally. I am very fond of, I said yesterday, Neil Young is absolutely in my top 5 artists of all time. So with full transparency there, I obviously am a little conflicted there, but I am very fond of Daniel and the team at Spotify, and I have many, many, many intimate friends who were the earliest team members at Spotify as well, as Sarah can confirm. So I'm very fond of both camps, honestly, somewhat equally. So I don't really have a dog in this fight at all. I mean, I'm equally conflicted on both sides, you could say. So my point is not that Spotify did something wrong or Neil Young did something right or anything like that, or vice versa. Not at all. My point is the art of clickbait and this whole crazy world that we live in, where Rolling Stone and New York Times could have headlines that are nearly in their implied meanings somewhat reciprocal or opposites, and looking at all of the headlines just as a practice. NPR, which normally kind of is right down the middle, says Spotify removes Neil Young's music after he objects to Joe Rogan's podcast. NBC News says Spotify agrees to remove Neil Young's music over Joe Rogan dispute. I gotta say, that might be my favorite version of that headline, because I feel like that actually captures the essence of it. But many of them, like Bloomberg, Spotify removes Neil Young's music after ultimatum over Joe Rogan. There's
And
tons
by the
of
way, Tyler, and
yes,
the cadence of those headlines
yep,
is correct in terms of like the timing. This is far from the worst, most misleading headlines I've ever seen. I mean, it's I think it's a little nitpicking. A lot of them probably didn't spend the amount of time we're spending figuring out the correct wordage, because it is factually correct. He complained, they removed it, and whether they did it in retaliation, or which is the implication of you're saying of some of the headlines, or they did it as request. People have to read the article, but I don't think it's
okay.
I don't think it's this is not like the I see much worse clickbait than
Yeah,
this
there is much
in
worse. But here's one. Variety, which is based in Hollywood, says Neil Young removes his music from Spotify. Which
Tyler, can I have a
one second, David. So Variety out of Hollywood says Neil Young removes his music from Spotify. Rolling Stone is a music publication. Neil Young demands Spotify remove his music. New York Times, Spotify removes Neil Young's music. Hollywood Reporter, Spotify to pull Neil Young's music. The Guardian, Spotify removes Neil Young's music in feud over Joe Rogan's false COVID claims. LA Times, why Spotify picked Joe Rogan over Neil Young in its misinformation fight. Washington Post, Spotify pulls Neil Young's music after his ultimatum regarding Joe Rogan. Who else? BBC, Spotify removes Neil Young after he calls for Joe Rogan to go. The majority of these are choosing to go with the headline that Spotify removes Neil Young due to some dispute. In essence, the bigger, I'm noticing the kind of theme where the bigger ones, like the BBCs and the New York Times and the Guardians and the NPRs and what have you, are taking that kind of approach, where the media relate. I mean, sorry, like the industry related publications, like the Hollywood Reporter, Rolling Stone, and what have you. These are industry publications. They're targeting a specific industry audience. They're kind of doing more of the essence because people in those industry actually knew what happened. You can't do what the mainstream media headlines are doing to the people in the music industry, because they know goddamn well what happened. They know Neil Young called the shots in this. That this was Neil Young's choice and decision to do this. So if the trade publications, the Hollywood Reporters and Varieties and Rolling Stones, were to do what the mainstream publications would do, the music industry would be like, oh, WTF? No, that ain't what happened at all. You're losing complete credibility with us as your audience of informed readers. You're giving a wildly misinformed headline. And that's why they're not doing what the big media publications are doing. Because the big media publications don't mind completely misinforming you based on the headlines. They're just going for the cheap clicks. And the industry publications can't afford to do that because they have an informed audience in this case, who are music industry executives, who know exactly what happened. That Neil Young said, if you don't do, I'm giving you an ultimatum, and if you don't do it, I'm going to insist that my music come down. You have no say in the matter, Spotify. It's my choice. You have to do what I say. I have the rights. I can still maintain. The reason, by the way, that Neil Young sold 50% of his music catalog just recently for $150 million, by the way, half of it, 50%, was because he wanted to be able to maintain control. Because, God bless Neil Young, he is a bit of a control freak when it comes to his rights, as all the great musicians tend to be once they're able to be. And God knows he's able to be, because he had Elliott as his manager. And, Neil Young's been able to be this amazing kind of somebody who's consistently, as I said yesterday, been able to use his career as a platform for standing up for certain issues. As I said, this is not unique that Neil is doing this. He's done this multiple times over his career, and Elliott was kind of one of the driving forces behind that while he was alive. And he's doing it yet again. It's not a surprise at all. But make no mistake, this is Neil Young's doing, utterly, completely, top to bottom. Spotify has no choice to comply in this issue. Spotify cannot say, you know what, Neil, we know you want to take your songs down, but we're not going to do that. No, they don't have that choice, because Neil Young intentionally controls his stuff. That's why he only sold half for $150 million and not all of it for $300 million. So he could do things like this. This is complete.
Tyler?
Yes. Very important.
This is David.
Very important.
Yeah, no.
Very importantly, when you understand the actual full context of this, that Neil Young owns his streaming rights. He decides if he's on Spotify or not. He decides if Spotify can play his music or not. And he can just force Spotify to remove his music, which he just did. Now,
and as you know,
when you read these headlines that say Spotify removes Neil Young's music after complaints about Joe Rogan, or Spotify to pull Neil Young's music after objections, no, Spotify is not pulling Neil Young. Neil Young's pulling Neil Young off of Spotify. Period.
Yeah, and Tyler, I was just going to say that it takes 5 seconds to translate what Spotify went out and said. They said one sentence, I think, yesterday, which basically was that we regret that Neil and respect his decision to remove it. And we hope to see him back soon.
And by the way,
we hope to see him back soon.
As Sarah well knows, and as Spotify well knows, Spotify knows it's Neil's choice. Spotify regrets that Neil's choosing this. They don't want to see him go. Spotify loves Neil Young. Spotify, it's unfortunate. And Spotify is not going to try and imply that it's their decision. They're way above doing what the New York Times or the Hollywood, what the Guardian or the BBC are doing in this case. Spotify themselves is not doing what the mainstream medium is doing in this case. And that proves what you need to know about what's actually going on here. And again, the trade publications, the music related, the Hollywood related publications can't play that game either. They gotta represent what's actually really happening because they have an informed audience. But again, this is another example where a non-informed audience reads the headline, doesn't read the stories, and walks away now misinformed. Not a little bit, completely, utterly misinformed.
Tyler?
Yes.
Tyler.
Go, David's been waiting
Yesterday.
patiently, Messy. Hold on. Go ahead,
Okay.
David.
This is David over in the Twitter space side. So journalists were kind of the original strategic communicators, meaning it's all in the headline. Like quite frankly, they do semantic, make lots of decisions to anchor the core message, right? And you are spot on in terms of like how that's twisted, and it is when you do a critical analysis of these different segments of media, it is appalling. It can be appalling, not always, but it can be appalling. But this story is about misinformation and about how the large distribution channels, which is the media for the content creators, whether that's Tucker Carlson, anybody on MSNBC, or in this case, Joe Rogan, are making decisions with regards to how they channel misinformation to the masses. So, I mean, there are this is a vote of what's that old common wisdom about vote with your dollar, right? When you don't like something, vote with your dollar. This is an effort by Neil Young to bring attention to the issue. And it's, on the other side of the fence, you've got the quote unquote free underline, triple underline speech, that the context that the Spotify is using to engage, with Rogan, which everybody understands that if your context is solely money, but it certainly could catalyze a dialogue where, there are perhaps some more content creators, in this case, again, Neil Young, where they do kind of band together, and that's what he's suggesting with his kind of like moral stance. But there is a much richer, much more important issue going on, and I agree with you completely. They have a total missed opportunity here with regards to this core issue of misinformation, how it gets amplified.
Okay, so here's another example. Here's an example I want to get into. So I'm on Facebook, and I stumble upon Breitbart, everybody's favorite publication, and it says rich leftist elite Neil Young said it's him or Joe Rogan, so Spotify deleted Neil Young. There's 38,000 comments. Sorting by the most relevant comments with the most likes. So the first comment has more than 7,000 likes. It says, honestly, thought he died years ago. My bad. Okay.
Oh my God. So, Tyler,
It's
do
just
you think
ugly.
that WSG is playing or maybe appealing towards the right-wing people by doing such things? Because it clearly looks like that way. They are kind of bashing Neil Young's this stance of standing against misinformation. And the truth is that it was such a great deal that this stance was taken by him. It shows people that what we can do to fight off misinformation, and we can stand against even big names. But the way WSG is posting this news seems like they are appealing to right wing people, making them happy, thinking that the power lied with Spotify when it was totally the opposite way.
Yeah,
But
this is the natural state of media and like not necessarily journalism, let alone investigative journalism, right? And in this room, we are in like the less than 1% of people that actually take time to read full articles and even try and see what the opposing view might possibly say as well. So, and this has been a natural theme of mine ongoing since I've been in tech news around the world, which is just how people actually disseminate information, right? I used to work with ads and marketing on social media, and then I actually moved to try and disseminate like true information and, allow people to understand it. And that is not what people do within journalism. You need to appeal to a side and amplify it and super inflate their egos and do so many other things just to appease a mass audience, right? And a big part of that is also alienating another side. So so much of it is part of media and like self-aggrandizing and just doing a lot to make people feel better about themselves. And yeah, that's just how this media type of thing goes. But when you start talking about people who are directly within industry or people who have a higher propensity to look for the right information, then you're talking about the less than 1% or even in the top 10% of people that read, basically.
I want to hand it back to
Um,
Messi. Hold on one sec, because Messi was waiting. And before I just the quick little point I wanted to add on here was that reading the comments of the article,
Breitbart.
yeah, reading the comments of Breitbart, it's clear that they read the headline and not the whole story. They're being misinformed by the headline. You know that Neil Young, rich leftist elite Neil Young said it's him or Joe Rogan, so Spotify deleted Neil Young, and the comments are like, "Bye bye Neil. Oh, he played himself and he lost," and this kind of. What do you mean he lost? This is his doing, utterly, completely. There's no. So my point is that it's a confirmation that people do read the headlines and get misinformed by them. Is my point, and this is, and of course, this the bigger point I'm trying to make here goes way, 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 way beyond Neil Young and Spotify. Again, I love both of them. Just to be clear, again, I just want to reiterate that. And neither of them are wrong. And by the way, this is a media issue. Neil did what Neil did. Spotify knows what Neil did. Spotify is not pretending anything other than that. Spotify, God bless Spotify for being. They're not trying to manipulate anybody in covering what's going on. The mainstream media is for some clicks, and people are falling for it, and the comments reflect that, and it's very sad. And that's the bigger issue. And again, it goes way beyond Neil and Spotify. It's what's the word I'm looking for? Emblematic of how the news sausage gets made generally, and it's happening all the time, and we see it here on a nearly daily basis. And this is just today's version of it, and this one is so transparently comical that I it's a nice case example of uh, that summarizes where things are at, with regard to media and lack of what.
Hey, Tyler, can I put something in perspective for you? Because
Go
I
ahead.
used to write for Business Insider, okay? And when I say I wrote for Business Insider, I was not an employee. I was not even paid by them. I had a blog when I was running my hedge fund, and Henry Blodgett asked me, because he had just started Business Insider, he said, "Could we syndicate?" That's what he used the word. Could we syndicate, your column? And I figured, why not? Because, I wanted more people to read. Who am I? I wanted more people to read the column anyway. So I was stupid. I should have asked for compensation. I should have even asked for stock because he just sold the thing for a fortune. I asked for nothing. So I was an idiot. Okay. But in any event, I write my blog. I publish it on my own blog, all I do is take the stuff and move it into their dedicated, they had like a dedicated WordPress thing, and that's it. They publish it. That's all they were supposed to do. Well, one day I had written a column about at the time a fairly well known Wall Street analyst who was really a corporate analyst. I mean, who covered banking. Okay, and she had written a column on predicting a wave of municipal bond defaults, and that's was kind of an area of specialty of mine years ago. And I knew she was, I really felt she was wrong, so I wrote an alternative column. Fine. Then a couple of weeks later, months later, whatever it was, the municipal bond waiver defaults never materialized. By the way, she wrote an accurate um, piece on the way the state of Illinois was going to finance the provision of school buses to the localities. I'm not going to get into it, but it was factually incorrect. Okay. Um, the editor, that was the only time that ever happened to me there. The editor took and so my headline was like, this analyst's name and school buses or something. They took my headline without my permission, without my knowledge until I saw it, and said this analyst lied, and the word lied was in the headline. And I went ballistic,
Hmm.
and they had to publish a retraction. Okay, because that's a big difference. So there's a very big difference. That's what I'm saying. I've seen worse.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's kind of really my only. And by the way, some of the stuff that you will see, if you go to any kind of web page, like particularly MSN.com, they have all sorts of sponsored ads with absolute clickbait. They'll talk about Jay Leno and his partner. Well, I've done a bunch of events with Jay Leno because I represented a singer who used to open for him. Jay Leno's had the same wife for like 30 years. Okay, there's no story there. Okay, and if you and there is no story. All we're going to do is you're going to click through a zillion ads. It's literally clickbait. You're going to click through a zillion ads and everything. They'll say next, next, next until you get to this so-called story, and they won't live end. They'll say this is Jay Leno. This is his wife. They've been married for 30 years. So there's no story. Okay, and that's clickbait. So when you talk about this thing in the context of everything else, I'm just not concerned about it
Yeah.
anyway.
Okay.
So I disagree. I
Um,
mean, I think it's pretty big. Sorry, it's Suzanne. I think it really harms the artist when you have a journalist that goes out and says something that really it's being unfair once again to artists. Although he's made a lot of money, there are a lot of artists out there that cannot um, adequately, represent themselves or defend themselves. So here you have a situation where he's getting, bad press, and I, um, or he's not being seen. It looks like Spotify is going against him rather than him doing something that he wanted to do.
I just wanted to also, like, I was watching the news yesterday, and then Tyler, to your point, even industry insiders. So, the Rolling Stone magazine was also being interviewed, and the way they put it is like what Suzanne just mentioned is like. Neil, what he said was, okay, look, I don't think you can have both. It's either me or Rogan. So they made a decision. It's not like Neil said, I gotta go. So to me is we need also ourselves in this room um, be sure which one is the right one. Did we hear it directly from Neil's mouth? If we're gonna say, well, no, this is not true, this is not that. So to me is like that's what I saw. That's what the Rolling Stone magazine person was explaining it, and then he said that he really doesn't want to be in the same platform where there is misinformation, and that Spotify gonna have to make a decision. So it's not like that he just walked up to them and say, "Hey, your choice is just me being gone." So I think they have made a conscious decision of making a choice.
Okay. So a couple of quick little points. Neil Young has his own websites with his own website with all of his own content for you to stream on his website. All of it. Because he can do that because he owns his own streaming rights. Just to give you a little clue as to what's going on here. And NME, the New Music Express, which is one of the world's biggest. It's like the Rolling Stone of Europe, essentially. NME. Neil Young claims Spotify removal will cost him 60% of his streaming income in the name of truth. Young thanked his truly great and supportive record company Warner Reprise for their support. Neil Young has shared two new statements on his website following the request of his music being removed from Spotify being granted by the streaming service. The statements, one titled Spotify in the Name of Truth, the other titled Thanks for Standing With Me, were published on the Neil Young archive site yesterday. In them, Young thanked his publisher and current record label Warner Reprise for their support and work that led to the removal of Young's music on the streaming platform. In the first statement, Young notes that before he told anyone at Warner about his decision, he was reminded by his own legal forces that he did not have control of his catalog to make that call on his own, right? Because he sold half of it. I announced I was leaving anyway because I knew I was, he wrote. I want to, because I knew I was. I announced I was leaving anyway because I knew I was, he wrote. I want to thank my truly great and supportive record company for standing with me in my decision. So he got approval from them to cooperate in this. Young's statement goes on to claim that the veteran singer-songwriter will lose 60% of his streaming income due to removing himself from the platform. While he admitted it was a huge loss for the label, he thanked them for recognizing the threat that COVID misinformation on Spotify posed to the world. Thank you, Warner Brothers, for standing with me and taking the hit, losing 60% of my worldwide streaming income in the name of truth, he wrote. The second statement continued the sentiments of the first, specifically extending thanks to his publishing company, with whom Young has worked since 2021, as well as Universal, who oversee 5 of Young's 41 studio albums due to the record deal with Geffen in the 80s. Quote, I am very happy with their support, he wrote. I want to personally thank them for standing with me. This is a costly move, but worth it for our integrity and beliefs. Young additionally thanked Universal for the conscience of its executives. I truly appreciate your help and support. Young announced his intentions to leave Spotify last week in protest of the streaming platform, blah, 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 in his initial response. Now that, my friends, is how you cover the facts. That is, and they have to, because they are an industry publication writing to music industry executives. They have no choice but to cover it correctly. You will see anything remotely like that in the mainstream media. Not even close. You have to love that. Now, in all fairness, they're essentially just, in some sense, resharing what Neil's sharing on his own personal blog, which is that's to whoever's point that was it Jennifer's or Messy's, about going to the horse's mouth about, what is he actually saying directly, because if we're not hearing it from him directly, then we're just kind of assuming, and that is a very cogent point as part of the hygiene of getting down to the nitty-gritty of how this works. I love the additional nuance of knowing that he needed to get his label's support and his publisher's support, which makes sense, because if they are exactly 50-50, maybe their agreement says that they need to both sign off on things like this, and apparently they did, and he's appreciative, and I love the additional context. So
Tyler,
yes.
Tyler, it's Asif here.
Yeah.
Don't you think, because this is quite big news in a way, because it's about truth and someone standing up for it at a cost to themselves. And so these main newspapers who are writing these kind of misinformation,
right,
they have editors to letters, and we have 300-400 people listening in every day. And if we inundated these people with letters to editors from the information you've just given, that may have some bearing going forward. Just a thought.
Yeah.
Tyler, can I chime in as well?
I'll hand it right to you. One quick response to our friend Asif, which is that is partly why Neil has some of the strongest fans in the music biz, and has for decades. As Dr. Fran seems to be a fan myself, that's why I said those of us who have been fans of Neil for a very long time, this is not unique to Neil. In fact, this is incredibly who Neil is at his core. Is he repeatedly, happily will do things that cost him financially for this is classic Neil Young, by the way, what he's doing here. So anyone who tries to paint a picture of, this guy just made a mistake, he's been doing this longer than you've been alive. So go ahead and go crack open the Wikipedia page and the history books and take notes on, by the way, any artist who you like worships Neil Young, both creatively and professionally, in how he conducts himself as an artist. and creatively. He's the top of the top, right there with the Beatles and Bob Dylan, by the way. So you can think whatever you want about Neil Young. Just understand that the artist that you like the most on Spotify worships Neil Young, both creatively and in a business context. What's the word for that? Economically, not economically. What's the word I'm looking for? Uh,
Can I offer a word,
Go
Tyler?
ahead, David.
So I'll use the word honor. And I'll use that word because that's the word that David Gergen used in one of the politics and media conversations that we had on Clubhouse earlier this week. He was talking about, he remembers honor when the World War II veterans went into Washington, D.C. We had a generation of honorable politics and how that's very different now. But he selected the word honor. And in this, there is a generational divide story here, absolutely, between Rogan and Neil Young. And I would just like to just amplify or put an accent or something on the idea that the original hippies were the hippies. So Neil Young, as a socially minded soul, his whole life has been walking along that purpose. And that's just it's something to keep in mind because there are a lot of Gen Zs and millennials that are really looking at us boomers and throwing us all into one pot as corporatists. And I just want to just kind of put a button on the idea that doesn't matter your age, your spirit and how your social cue, I call it, is it defies age. So I just wanted honor was a word that was used by Gergen to kind of show just people's principles and things like that with regards to this misinformation and how do you choose to amplify it or not. Thanks.
Is it integrity?
Tyler, I have another point.
Okay.
At the bottom of the article, it says that Wall Street Journal and Spotify have media relationship and they share with each other probably the royalties, and the loss of the money or the income is probably the reason for the grievance against this negative look on the news, because that means Wall Street Journal is going to share the loss of the revenue that Spotify was receiving from, uh, this loss of Neil Young, and that's why probably they are trying to portray it in a negative manner. They have this business partnership with each other, and that's why Wall Street Journal is kind of putting it negatively. Plus, there's another additional part of music revenue industry and how those shareholders are also going to suffer the loss of the um, income. So Neil Young has taken a great stance at his own expense and at the expense of his company or the people who were, in partnership with him and using his dollar to stand against misinformation. To me, this is a heroic act.
Well, that's what he put. I'll hand it to you, Dr. Fran. In the last paragraph on his own website in the past 24 hours, he says he thanks Warner Brothers, Universal, and his publisher standing up with me to help stop the flow of misinformation. Thanks so much to all of you. We did what we had to do. Yeah, the dude. This is, as I've said, this is classic Neil Young, and he doesn't put money above his. And that's part of what I was saying. That's part of the reason that people who are lifelong fans of Neil Young continue to be so. And he's a special kind of artist in that way. And artists often like to think of themselves that they would put their values and morals above money. Artists like to think that they would do that, and it's in fact, when it comes down to it, it's actually quite rare that they do that, even though they all dream to do that. And Neil Young's one of the ones who actually does it, and that's why I've said that there's even artists who might not like him musically who have tremendous respect for him because of his reputation for doing things exactly like this. And then you have people who love him musically and don't, and then you have both. And that was my point, is all. So I think we've covered this particular topic at length. Dr. Friend, you wanted to say something?
If you're going to make an ultimatum, you always have to be ready to stand by it, and
Yeah.
he stood by it, which
Oh,
is good.
yeah, make no mistake. He knew what the outcome of the ultimatum was going to be. That's totally clear. So, yeah, there was no question that they were going to, take down somebody they just paid $100 million for. That was never going to happen. So, shall we get into the number 2 article? Number 2 is from Bloomberg. They say they've got sources.
Hey, Tyler.
Yes.
Tyler,
John.
but before you go on, there are some other notable musicians who have taken huge sacrifices for
Sure.
principal positions.
Amen.
So
Well said.
shout out to Dixie Chicks and others who have taken the same huge hit for what something they believed in, whether you agree with it or not. Putting their principles ahead of their financial practices is laudable.
Yeah. Amen to that. Mark Gurman, our buddy over at Bloomberg, the guy who was surprised to find out there was fine print on the rebates with the Apple devices, says he's got sources yet again. I think he had some yesterday. Apparently, he's got some leakers over there at Apple. And Apple is working to let businesses. This is awesome. Oh, this is dope. This is a great headline, everybody. Wow. This is a doozy. Apple is working to let businesses accept payments on their iPhones directly without any additional hardware, thanks to tech from a company called MobiWave, which it acquired in 2020. And I read in other publications that it's a business, can be even an individual who just registers as a business. You'll be able to accept credit cards with simply your iPhone with no additional hardware. Somebody takes their physical credit card, if it has an NFC chip in it, approaches your phone, taps your phone, bada boom, bada bing, you can charge that credit card. Now you can accept credit cards lickety split. That's what's coming, ostensibly. That's what this headline's all about. So, just reading the first few paragraphs, it says Apple's planning a new service that will let small businesses, incredibly small, like individuals, accept payments directly on their iPhones without any extra hardware. According to people with knowledge of the matter, the company has been working on the new feature since around 2020, when it paid around $100 million for a Canadian startup called MobiWave that developed technology for smartphones to accept payments with the tap of a credit card. The system will likely use the iPhone's near-field communications. No, not likely. Absolutely. That's what it will do. Come on. The NFC chip that is currently used for Apple Pay. Yes, there's no question that that's how it'll work. In order to accept payments on an iPhone today, merchants need to use payment terminals that plug in or communicate with the phone via Bluetooth. Yep. The upcoming feature will instead turn the iPhone into a payment terminal, letting users such as food trucks and hairstylists accept payments with the tap of a credit card or another iPhone onto the back of their device. Right. You can do iPhone to iPhone NFC payments, by the way. Now we're getting somewhere. So the move could impact payment providers that rely on Apple's iPhones to facilitate sales, such as Block's Square, which dominates the market. If Apple lets any app use the new technology, then Square can continue accepting payments via Apple devices without needing to worry about providing its own hardware. If Apple requires merchants to use Apple Pay or its own payment processing system, that could compete directly with Square. A Block representative did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Square's shares fell 3.4% on the market when the market opened in New York on Thursday. Apple's shares rose 2%. It's unclear whether the payment acceptance option will be branded as part of Apple Pay, though the team working on the feature has been working within Apple's payment division since being brought over from MobiWave, the people said. It's also not known if Apple intends to partner with an existing payment network for the feature or launch it alone. That would be Visa or MasterCard. Apple may begin rolling out the feature via its software update in the coming months, the people said. The company is expected to release the first beta version in iOS 15.4 in the near future, which is likely to see a final release for consumers as early as the spring. Wow, that's right around the corner. An Apple spokesperson declined to comment. That would put the debut near a few other announcements. Apple plans to so those like JT and myself, who are kind of serious Apple geeks, know if you read between the lines here, this would be a perfect announcement for WWDC, which is in the spring each year. And it would be bizarre that they would do WWDC with this on the back burner and not share it at WWDC, because this could be one of the greatest things ever. This is potentially would be a huge, the marquee announcement at WWDC. So I think that's a very safe assumption, given what. And by the way, Aaron, who's on the Twitter Spaces, God bless him, happens to have a lengthy professional background in this space, having worked at MasterCard in precisely this space of kind of modern card payments and whatnot. So let's invite our friend Aaron to speak on the Twitter Space and see if he might be able to share his thoughts on Apple going into the Square now block space. Aaron, are you listening passively, or hopefully you're listening actively? I just sent him an invite to join us as a speaker. Hopefully Aaron's listening.
Yeah. I think Aaron also shared a tweet regarding some bot founder, which is quite interesting too. But I think he must be busy. He's not accepting the invite.
Right. That's unfortunate, because he drops knowledge bombs quite regularly. Anyway, so we will charge right along. The next big story, Wall Street Journal says they have sources that Facebook-backed Diem Association is selling its technology to California bank. So, well, that was fast. We just read this yesterday that they were planning to sell it, and here we are 24 hours later with rumors of a potential buyer already. So we read yesterday that Facebook was going to liquidate the Diem Association, as it's called. And now the Wall Street Journal says they have sources that the Diem Association is selling to California bank called Silvergate Capital, which serves crypto companies, and they're selling it for $200 million. There you go. Article number 1, 2, 3, 4. Samsung does their quarterly earnings, because we are in quarterly earning seasons, and operating profit of $11.6 billion, up 53% year over year. I told you the chip companies were going to continue to kick ass, did I not? And that's huge, 53% year over year for a company of that size. And revenue up 24% year over year, but misses with only 8.9 billion net income, below the 9.2 billion expected. Next, Reddit is conducting a small internal test of a feature that lets users set any NFT they own as their profile picture, basically copying Twitter's announcement from recent days of exactly the same thing. Now, what will be interesting is if they're collaborate on which chains they accept, and I imagine they might, because when you get Reddit and Twitter and other platforms all kind of agreeing on which chains they'll recognize, boy oh boy, does that sort of set the default, the industry standard for which chains will be the official de facto NFT icon chains. And you'll have the same, you'll have the same image on both of those networks and what have you. Now, a sister comment about Reddit was, did anyone see the moderator, I guess the main moderator for one of Reddit's fastest growing communities, the anti-work community, or subreddit as they're called over in Reddit's, who appeared on Fox News in the past 24 hours. And the anti-work is a community, again, what is called a subreddit inside of Reddit, that is one of the fastest growing ever, if not the fastest growing ever. My God, has the anti-work subreddit just exploded in recent months and become wildly popular. It's on the front page all the time, every day, where they are constantly griping about, the current status of, capitalism in America in 2022 and the worker boss relationship, company employee relationship. And so they had one of their top moderators appear in a video call on Fox News, where the Fox News host or anchor said, hey, in America, it's work. You can leave at will. No one's forcing you to work. And what are you complaining about? That there's no slavery in America. You're in your what's your point exactly? American workers are able to leave anytime they want. So what's your point here? And let's just say, it turns out that the moderator from Reddit is apparently reportedly autistic and non-binary and clearly a bit introverted, and rather epitomizes everybody's stereotypical image of what they assume a Reddit moderator would look and feel and behave like, and kind of managed to self-implode. And now the anti-work Reddit today has become a complete dumpster fire. It's questionable if it will even exist in 48 hours. So as a result of appearing on this Fox News. Anyway, so that's happening over there at Reddit at the moment. The next article is that a company called Fan House, an OnlyFans-like platform, introduces a 50% surcharge for iOS in-app payments after pushing back in 2021 on Apple's 30% commission on creator earnings. Fan House previously tried to push back against Apple's fees and was granted a 6-month extension to come onto compliance, what have you. Okay, I guess there's now a alternative to OnlyFans, which itself was rather imploding, honestly, as a result of that whole fiasco. Next one, Coin Tracker, which helps crypto investors track their tax liabilities and earnings, raises $100 million, led by Excel at a $1.3 billion valuation. Adobe-led tech coalition finalizes a standard for digital content provenance. This is quite interesting, honestly. And you can think NFT minting is with the implication here. Identifying the source and edits of photos and videos to help catch deepfakes. I love this. This is freaking unbelievably cool. That a platform like Photoshop can determine the originators of content, and kind of ostensibly they're going to use a blockchain for this. And this becomes that Photoshop becomes the minting process of who's the originator of content, where if you take an image off that you find on the web and bring it into Photoshop and edit it, Photoshop will know, oh, you're taking the image that somebody, started with, 9 months ago in Photoshop, and we know that file and we can see what you're doing to it. That gets incredibly cool. What would become even cooler is if the other Photoshop-like apps also collaborate in this and share the kind of metadata behind those files in the background, so that once a file is created, it's known when it gets monkeyed with or edited in any of the other platforms. Can you imagine how incredibly cool that would be? It would essentially be one of the most effective ways to address the whole deep fake scenario that is going to unfold like a tidal wave over society in dystopian
Tyler, that may
ways.
be very relevant to Prince Andrew.
It's going to be relevant to every single person on the planet in ways we cannot even begin to comprehend. So the next one is from the New York Times, and it says this is kind of a late-breaking story, that a growing number of U.S. mayors are embracing crypto and blockchain technology, hoping to create revenue streams with NFTs or mining and attract tech talent and more. This is an interesting story. And indeed, it's no doubt going to mention Miami's Mayor Suarez. They have to, because he was kind of the first to kind of jump headstrong into this in a big way. It says this new political breed of mayors accepts paychecks in Bitcoin. Yes, we've read those headlines months ago where both New York's new mayor and Miami's mayor were both competing to see how many of their paychecks they were going to take in Bitcoins.
I wonder if they regret that now in the crypto winter.
Yeah, fair point. The mayors also want to use buzzy new tech like NFTs to raise money for public projects. And that's where things can get really interesting. Scott Conger, the mayor of Jackson, Tennessee, campaigned on a modest promise to improve local infrastructure. He planned to build sidewalks, open a senior center, and repair the aging stormwater disposal system in his city of 68,000 people, about halfway between Nashville and Memphis. But as he begins his fourth year in office, Mr. Conger, 38 years old, has adopted a new favorite cause, which is cryptocurrencies. He has pledged to give city employees the option of converting their paychecks into Bitcoin and has outlined plans to install a digital mining network in a deserted wing of City Hall. The aim, he said, is to make Jackson a southeastern tech center. Like many Americans, Mr. Conger discovered crypto during the pandemic and soon fell down the internet rabbit hole. His plans have turned him into something of a celebrity in the crypto world and a strange distinction for a leader of a mid-sized industrial hub where Pringles potato chips are manufactured. Quote, Bitcoin is a great financial equalizer, Mr. Conger declared this month in an interview at City Hall. It's a hedge against inflation. It can bridge the wealth gap. The ballooning popularity of Bitcoin and other digital currencies have given rise to a strange new political breed, the crypto mayor. Eric Adams, New York's mayor, accepted his first paycheck in Bitcoin and another cryptocurrency, Ether. Francis Suarez, Miami's mayor, as I told you would be mentioned, headlines crypto conferences. Now even mayors of smaller towns are trying to incorporate crypto into municipal government, courting startups, and experimenting with buzzy new technologies like NFTs to raise money for public projects. Their growing ranks reflect the increasing mainstream acceptance of digital currencies, which are highly volatile and have fallen in value in recent days. The mayor's embrace of crypto is also a recognition that its underlying blockchain technology, essentially a distributed ledger system, may create new revenue streams for cities and reshape some basic functions of local government. Quote, mayors rationally want to attract high-income citizens who pay their taxes and impose few costs on the municipality, says a business professor at Stanford. Quote, crypto geeks fit this bill perfectly. But as with many ambitious crypto projects, it's unclear whether these local initiatives will ultimately amount to much. So far, most are either largely symbolic or largely theoretical, and the mayor's aims are partly political. Crypto boosterism has a useful bipartisan appeal, garnering popularity among both anti-government conservatives and socially liberal tech moguls. Quote, you can do these things because you want to be associated with dudes with AR-15s, or you want to be associated with META, says a technology study professor at University California, Davis, who wrote the 2019 book about the history of crypto. A lot of it is hype and hot air. Any thoughts on governments embracing small governments?
Well, can I simply remind people about how challenging that can be? It's an unregulated space, which to me is a big problem. I think that there is a bit more, I think that there should be some level of regulation before public funds are used in that context, in my opinion.
So on this point, I want to ping in, and I am pinging into Clubhouse, a friend of mine, Matthias Sunden, which any Swede on stage will know, as he was a member of parliament. He's a personal friend who, 8 years ago, did his entire campaign fundraising in Bitcoin. 50 years before any other political candidate will even think to consider it. So I'm just pinging him in as somebody who's, 50 years ahead of other politicians to give us a little thought on this article, if he happened to have seen it or not.
Well, what I find is exciting about that, at least, is I think it opens the conversation to maybe working with government a little better on regulation. Because I think if everyone's on either sides and not working together, we're not going to get through this. So I find it really exciting.
Okay. So the next article is,
can I chime in on one last thing, Tyler,
sure,
on that? I just wanted to say, part of the big motivation is the idea around wealth creation, right? For those that have a new avenue, right? And I would like to say back in the 80s is when middle America discovered Wall Street. But it was a regulated investment, right? So all I want to simply state is, for people who say that crypto is great for those that are disenfranchised and all of that, it's like, well, yes, but with it not being regulated, it is very, very risky. And so I just wanted to kind of put that historical point on it. Thanks.
Sure. The next one is Apple says it's rolling out a fix for a bug in CloudKit's backend that for months intermittently prevented third-party apps from syncing with iCloud. Yeah, might as well fix that one. Okay. Apple's rolling out a fix for the months-old issue Apple has identified and is rolling out a fix for the bug. God bless them. Fixing bugs. There you go, Apple. You're the world's biggest company. Let's just go ahead and make the product actually work. What a great concept. That's fantastic. Next one is YouTube permanently bans Fox News's Dan Bongino for trying to evade a previous suspension. The pro-Trump pundit previously said he planned to leave the platform. YouTube on Wednesday permanently banned conservative commenter Dan Bongino from YouTube, saying he attempted to evade a previous suspension. And one thing to note is Dan is each day one of the biggest profiles in all of Facebook. Every day. He's in the top 10 every day and has been every day for years. So it's no, and interestingly that he's, able to do that in Facebook unimpeded for the most part, and is banned from YouTube, interestingly. The next one is Reuters says a company called WeRock, which runs WeTransfer, pauses its Amsterdam IPO slated for January 28th. Who cares? Next one. Apple News was the most widely used UK news app in December 2021 with 13.2 million users. BBC News had 12.5 million users. So Apple News has passed BBC News. Okay. And what's next? Funding for early stage Latino founded startups in the US has stalled. 205 million was invested in angel pre-seed in 2021, up from 185 million in 2018. Okay, that's unfortunate. Intel reports its quarterly results, a revenue of about $20 billion, up 4% year over year. And Intel's a notable exception of a chip company that isn't having a fantastic time. But they are doing a tremendous investment as of late for the near future. A Berlin-based company called Maid, M-A-Y-D, which offers rapid pharmacy deliveries, raises 30 million. Discord experienced a widespread API outage, preventing many users from joining calls or chatting. Discord says services are back online after over 2 hours. And Washington Attorney General orders Amazon to pay $2.2 million and to shut down its third-party sold by Amazon program over price fixing and unreasonably restraining competition. Amazon is shutting down its sold by Amazon program after an investigation from Washington Attorney General Bob Ferguson, to be continued, no doubt. And then ID.me is back in the news. We mentioned their name about a week ago, which is going to be, they're partnering with the IRS, if you remember that headline from last week. So I'm curious to see what the update is about. And they're partnering with the IRS, the Internal Revenue Service, the Tax Collection Agency of America, to do facial recognition on Americans who are paying their taxes. And the question is, why do they need facial recognition for you to pay them money? It's a good question.
Technically, it's like facial verification, right? But yeah,
right.
I mean, the IRS isn't putting cameras on the streets to watch people.
Right. So
But
ID.me backtracks and admits to using one-to-many facial recognition across large databases, which last week it called more problematic than one-to-one face matching. This is kind of a geeky publication going kind of deep into the technical weeds for a bit. It goes on over a subtle but important difference between one-to-one face matching and one-to-many face matching.
Yeah, I mean, we do that on our iPhone every minute, right?
Right.
But
So,
yeah, that would be bizarre if they're using facial recognition.
Right. identity verification company ID.me uses a type of powerful facial recognition that searches for individuals within mass databases of photos. That's called one-to-many. They pick you out of a haystack. Blake Hall explained in a LinkedIn post on Wednesday. The post follows a news release from the company last week stating directly that our one-to-one face match is comparable to taking a selfie to unlock a smartphone. So they're branding themselves as one-to-one, and yet there's rumors that they are doing one-to-many. So let's see how this shakes out, right? ID.me does not use one-to-many facial recognition, which is more complex and problematic. Hall's post on Wednesday confirms that ID.me does indeed use one-to-many technology. Oh shit. Do you see where this is going? Privacy advocates say that both versions of facial recognition pose a threat to consumers, in addition to numerous studies demonstrating the technology is less accurate on non-white skin tones. Which, by the way, that would be kind of a benefit in the case of the tax collection schemes. If you pick up what I'm laying down, that's not an instance where you want to be identified, by the way. So, privacy. Governments and companies are amassing these databases of your personal biometric information, which, unlike databases of credit cards, cannot be replaced, explained somebody from Fight the Future. And these are databases that are highly targeted by hackers and information that can absolutely be used in ways that are harmful to people. Again, not something you want to be part of. So maybe don't complain too much that you're not able to participate fully in it. You see what I'm saying? I love you, my black friends, but this is not the opportunity that you're looking for to participate. This is not the one that you want. This is a unique situation where you're going to be more than happy to sit this one out. So
unless you're on the receiving end of a false identity and a claim
true.
about your tax evasion.
Thank you, John. As John does, he brings up brilliant points like that, which is he's absolutely right. The bad scenario is being misidentified, and that's a legitimate concern that is inevitably going to happen. And let's hope that the journalists have their A game on when that does happen, and that gets highlighted to the nth degree and debated and discussed endlessly, correctly, thoroughly. It's inevitable that it will happen if it hasn't already. And if it has, it would be a shame that it hasn't received its due attention, or for lack of a better word. So anyway, it does not block legitimate. In a Wednesday LinkedIn post, Hall said that the one-to-many verification is used once during the enrollment and is not tied to identity verification. It does not block legitimate users from verifying their identity, nor is it used for any other purpose other than to prevent identity theft. We avoid disclosing methods we use to stop identity theft. And so they're saying, all right. He pointed to a recent indictment of a New Jersey man last week by the FBI after the man bypassed ID.me's verification system and stole nearly $1 million in unemployment benefits. The LinkedIn post follows internal discussions expressing concerns that the company's public statements had been inaccurate. Quote, we could disable the one-to-many face search, but then lose a valuable fraud-fighting tool. Oh, snap. He got him to admit it. Or we could change our public stance on using one-to-many face search, an engineer wrote in a message posted to company Slack channel on Tuesday. But it seems we can't keep doing one thing and saying another, as that's bound to land us in hot water. Oh boy. The internal messages obtained by Cyberscoop also imply that the company discussed the use of one-to-many with the IRS in a meeting. Quote, I was in a conversation with the IRS on January 19 where we explicitly discussed using AWS recognition for one-to-many face search, the engineer wrote. This seems like it could be troublesome, so I wanted to post this here to discuss next steps. While ID.me lists Paravision and iApprove as biometric technology partners, it does not appear to disclose its relationship with Amazon's facial recognition product. Amazon isn't mentioned in a recently released white paper explaining ID.me's technology. ID.me confirmed Thursday in an email to Cyberscoop that the company uses Amazon's recognition facial recognition product.
Imagine somebody steals your ID and then like fixes your credit, hides money in your bank accounts, orders stuff on Amazon that you like really need.
Now there's an app I download.
Yeah. So yeah, that's an interesting one. But this, I mean, we could file this one in many different folders in the filing cabinet, but one of the, this is where technology is getting a little too far out ahead of our own ability to manage it. And Michael correctly makes light of it, as he brilliantly does. It's like, weird shit's going to happen in ways that we can't begin to imagine yet, and we're not ready for this. We don't
accountant.
Yeah, we barely have the language sorted to have the necessary discussions about where all this is going to go.
This is the perfect place for my favorite law, the law of unintended consequences.
Yes. Well said, Francine. Okay. Yeah. So that might be an opportunity. There's a somewhat similar article that Data on Stage tweeted out that I retweeted. And let's jump into that one, Jonathan, shall we? It's about Jonathan, from what I can gather, has been doing some research lately about China's Olympic app, which is required for all Olympic athletes. And Jonathan's tweet that I need to give me 2 seconds to pull it up. It was my most recent tweet. Here it is. He says, after reverse engineering all of the Beijing 2022 app, he calls it the spyware app for the iPhone and Google Android, I can definitively say all Olympian audio is being collected, analyzed, recorded, and saved on Chinese servers using technology from America, which was blacklisted from a blacklisted AI firm called iFlyTech 1999. And then Wired does a story on this. I retweet it and tag Paul Moser, who covers tech in China for the New York Times, as well as Jeremy Taylor, who covers tech and political issues related to tech in the region, and Mark Scott, who covers tech in politics for Politico. And Jeremy, at least one of the three, at least I haven't looked lately to see who all has retweeted it and liked it, but I know one of them did. So they hopefully will dive into that issue, because that could be really, really interesting if proven to be true, that China's essentially doing cyber espionage. I know, brace yourself. I know that's a shocking concept right there.
Tyler, is it true that when you go into China as a tourist, you have to have an app installed that does similar things?
No,
I read that somewhere.
Not last time I went, just before COVID, but that could be different post-COVID, and certainly post after this app. But Jonathan, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and by the way, I'll be working with Politico, just actually confirmed to finally release my my full research. So it won't just be just me posting it on Twitter and saying go look at it. It'd be nice to thankfully have a respectable media outlet to publish. So yes, thanks. This is I know it's not shocking to many people, but I think the part that is needs to be understood is that the technology behind this app is, well, it's being run by a company that's been blacklisted by the U.S. and it's iFlyTech is the company, and they were blacklisted by the U.S. for actually creating spyware and for human rights violations. as it pertains to data privacy. And I think that the point that needs to be made is that you are required to install this application in order to participate in the Olympics. So I in the thread that I posted, there's a lot of information in there, and it'll all come out in this publication finally with Politico. But everyone is affected by this, because you can't even go into the into any event without this application on there. So the app stores knew this. Well, they should have known this, right? So the technology, the API, application programming interface, to connect back to iFlyTech is built into Android and iPhone apps. So Apple didn't do their due diligence, and Google didn't do their due diligence, and they're still allowing this app to be on the App Store that is sending data back to a company that is blacklisted by the U.S. And this is the fact. This is an absolute fact. Has been blacklisted by the U.S. And you know, I'm not familiar with the legality of that, but it does pose a huge issue. So it does have a continuous mode of monitoring that's actually happening. And so when Citizen Lab had first reported on this, they kind of touched on this topic, but it really struck me because I was triggered because I saw the name iFlyTech, and I remembered something about it, but until I really looked at it, then it kind of sank in. But the gist of it is that this application is on athletes and participants for all over the world, and it is blacklisted by the U.S. Take it how you will, but that in itself is already an issue. So, yeah.
Well, there's also I read yesterday or the day before that the U.S. is suggesting or maybe demanding or that the American athletes use burner phones when they attend the games and participate in the games.
Right. Yeah.
Which won't really make a difference in this case, because
right.
they've got the microphones on all the time and they're listening to everything everyone's saying.
Yeah. And
Why
the
is this?
information.
Why is the company blacklisted by the United States?
It was deemed as a spyware tool.
Oh, okay.
And it was it was shown to participate in human rights violations around the world.
And that's why the Chinese are requiring it on all the Olympians' phones.
Well,
Got it.
I can't confirm that, but what I can confirm that it does exist, and it's in the code, and all of this is based off of the code. It's not this is not conjecture, right? This is, and it's been verified by several professionals as well. And again, so it's something to definitely take seriously. And even if they bring a burner phone, right, that the information that has to be gathered, that you're required 14 days before the games to do daily health monitoring and enable all of these permissions, which I've posted. And then 14 days after the games have ended, you're still required to use this application and send the data back. That is just what they say. So there's just quite a bit of things that are actually happening in the background that people need to know about. Thank you.
Okay. Next up,
Jonathan, just a question, if I may. Is this a iFlyTech with a K? Written
yes.
with a K? Yeah.
Yes.
Because I see a Wikipedia text about it. And in 2018, just reading it, iFlyTech signed a 5-year collaboration agreement with the MIT Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence Laboratory. In 2020, the agreement was terminated due to human rights concerns. And there's a footnote pointing to just a fact, but not exactly about, probably about the Uyghurs. Yeah, that's a basic discussion when it's about human rights in China in the moment.
Okay.
Maybe you're covering this in Politico. I don't know. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. You're spot on about that. It speaks for itself.
Okay. Next up is from Bloomberg. As Congress works towards regulating big tech like Amazon, Apple, Facebook, and Google, filings show at least 95 members of Congress own shares in one or more of those companies. Which raises an interesting question. Should Congress people be allowed to invest in stock publicly tradable companies? So that there's potentially conflicts of interest like this. Next is Bloomberg covering the story that I mentioned near the top, which is that Reddit's anti-work subreddit or community, the fastest growing non-default subreddit, as I implied. Yeah, and it's good to see the confirmation. It was incredibly fast growing. With over 1.7 million members, suddenly went private on Wednesday. Well, Bloomberg, it's because they went on Fox News. It's because one of the moderators went on Fox News and kind of made a bit of an embarrassing interview, and that's why the blowback and the response to that interview is why it's gone. It didn't just magically go private for no reason, as Bloomberg is reporting. It went private for a very specific reason, which strangely, I'm reading the article here. Does it even mention the Fox? Oh, it does in the very, very, very end of the article. The subreddit's growing popularity has also brought more media attention. Ford recently was interviewed on Fox News. Wow, they mention it as like a second. This is really weird. So Bloomberg covers the fact that the anti-work subreddit goes private after brigading follows. There it is. Okay. No, well, that's weird that the text in the tech news, I'm sorry, the Clubhouse pin at the top of the room, thank you, Cheryl, for pinning it. The actual headline, I'm looking at the full article here in laptop form, and it says, anti-work subreddit suddenly goes private to clean up after brigading. It doesn't mention Fox News in the headline. And then the article goes on, 10 paragraphs long or whatever. The popular subreddit suddenly went private on Wednesday. The forum has more than 1.7 million members, and now it's locked from view, blah, blah, blah. We'll be back real soon. They talk about brigading. The forum slogan is unemployment for all, not just the rich, and it talks about the anti-work subreddit. It talks about the moderators. The next paragraph talks about capitalism. The next paragraph talks about we're now down at the very, very end of the article. That the community was growing popularity has also brought more media attention, and the moderator was recently interviewed on Fox News about the movement, and the moderator didn't immediately respond to a request for comment Wednesday. A representative for Reddit said the company wasn't involved in the decision. Wow, they really kind of mischaracterized, not surprisingly, why this very popular. It's really simple. This was a really simple story. That stories don't get more simple. This Reddit or subreddit moderator went on Fox News, gave a rather embarrassing interview, and there was an incredible amount of blowback. And calling him all kinds of names, embarrassing stuff. People were, saying all kinds of nasty stuff, which is not uncommon for, Reddit communities. And so he made as a result of all of that negative blowback from his rather embarrassing interview on Fox News in recent, the past few hours, he's turned this, what was previously one of the fastest growing Reddit communities of all time, private, which is a very strong thing to do. And it's very obvious why he did it to anyone who's paying even remote attention, despite the fact that Bloomberg doesn't seem to understand, even after reading the article, why it's gone. If you read the article as I just did, you will be misinformed as usual as to why this very popular subreddit has now gone private. As the actual headline says, the subreddit suddenly goes private due to clean up after brigading. No, They went private because they're being harassed because of a very embarrassing interview on Fox News, which, again, you don't really get from even after reading it carefully. Wild. This is a problem. This is a real problem, that Bloomberg isn't able to cover this very simple story. This is an incredibly, again, ridiculously simple situation of a Reddit moderator giving an embarrassing interview, driving that community crazy against itself. It's imploding. So he turned it off from public view to private view so that only the members, the 1.7 million members, can see what's going on. And so that dumpster fire is somewhat controlled amongst those 1.7 million people and not publicly viewable by everybody. That's what happened. Bloomberg, why not just report that? I don't know. So again, it's one of those scenarios where when you actually know what's going on and then you read an article that from somebody who doesn't really paint the accurate picture of what actually is happening, it leaves you scratching your head. And that's the second time in this hour that we've had this happen, is it not? That, in fact, the biggest article of the day, of the Neil Young Spotify kerfuffle, is an even bigger, broader example of that, where you have the New York Times and everyone reporting that Spotify is ostensibly punishing Neil Young for challenging Joe Rogan, which is not at all what happened, not even the slightest. And that's a real problem because people are going to be understandably misinformed. And we know they are, because when you read their comments on those articles, they say, oh, what a stupid decision this guy made. No, not at all. He knew exactly what was going to happen. And if you're just joining us, we dug deep into that to lay it all out, plain as day. Neil Young knew exactly how this was going to happen. He called all
And
the shots. Go ahead, Francine.
he chose it.
Exactly. But when you read these headlines from the New York Times and others, like Spotify removes Neil Young's music after complaints about Joe Rogan. No. Neil Young told Spotify to remove his songs, is what happened. That's actually what happened. And Spotify said, by the way, kudos to Spotify, who are not trying to manipulate the reality of what happened and create any kind of false narrative. They are very diplomatically saying exactly what happened, which is, hey, it's very regrettable. Neil Young asked us to remove his content. And, we don't really have a choice because he's a very clever dude, and he and the rights owners have the right to do that. And it's not our choice. It has nothing to do with us, ultimately. And it's very regrettable. We can't wait for him to come back. That's what they said, and that's the reality. However, you get articles with headlines like the New York Times that Spotify removes Neil Young's music after complaints about Joe Rogan, which, if you read that headline in isolation, as 99.9% of people do, you will be obviously misinformed. And you will think that Spotify is punishing Neil Young for challenging Joe Rogan, which is not what happened. And by the way, I'm not picking on the New York Times. The same thing's happening with the BBC. Spotify removes Neil Young after he calls for Joe Rogan to go. Or The Guardian, which says Spotify removes Neil Young music in feud over Joe Rogan's false COVID claims, etc., etc., etc. And it's not until you get into the music industry publications like Rolling Stone that said, well, which is kind of a pop version of the music industry, that says Neil Young demands Spotify remove his music. Yeah, there you go. That's a little more closer to what happened. But the Billboard and NME and the music publications, who are read by music industry artists and executives who know goddamn well what happened, that Neil Young is the one who decided to do this whole thing on his own terms, as he's always done for decades over the years, they can't try and pull a fast one over their own readership, because their readership are informed individuals who actually know Neil Young personally, like myself, who momentarily shared the same manager. Yes, go ahead.
This is David. I had to come over to the Clubhouse side because I was having some glitch issues on Twitch, but Twitter, sorry. Hey, so, I mean, I can't help but kind of point out that the underlying community was really, their whole issue is with regards to our current form of corporate capitalism and their kind of, issues with it, right? So, again, it's one of these socially minded, underlying mega themes that's not really being covered. It's more the kind of the media aspect of it. But I just wanted to assert that, because that's to me that's really the point that should be covered, quite frankly, and how as those voices go through media and social media, how just the path through that, how it's kind of interesting. You kind of can look behind the corporate boardroom doors, perhaps, or something, at some of the management decisions that you're speaking to, if that makes any sense.
Well, the bigger, broader point I'm trying to make is that out of the top 10 stories today, two of them are have an issue where, at face value, your average reader will be not only have the wrong impression, they'll have the completely wrong impression. They will be very misinformed. And that is symptomatic of what's happening writ large on all kinds of issues, way beyond and above Neil Young and Spotify, about COVID, for example, about vaccines.
Boy, do I agree with you. News has become like that game telephone that we used to play as kids, where it starts in one corner and by the time it gets to the other end of the circle, it's completely different in words, tone, and feeling than the original. And I'm not sure what to do about that because that's how misinformation starts and is spread.
By the way, I am no fan of what was John McCain's vice president nominee, uh, Sarah Palin.
Sarah Palin.
Sarah Palin is suing the New York Times on precisely this point, that they intentionally mischaracterized her business dealings, and now she's suing them. Right now, the point is nicely brought up again today in this.
Sarah Palin.
Yes. So when the New York Times chooses the headline that Spotify removes Neil Young's music after complaints about Joe Rogan, they are knowingly, intentionally crafting a headline for its clickability. And that's obvious. That's business. That's economics. I get that. But there's a huge cost to society for doing that. So it is, I guess I don't know if it's an apt comparison, but it's like huge corporations who willingly pollute CO2 into the atmosphere or poison the rivers for this, they privatize the profits and publicize, the cost. That we, the citizens, are paying the actual cost here because we're now have misinformed or uninformed citizens for the benefit of the New York Times getting a better click-through rate on their clickbait headline. Because make no mistake, that is a more clickable headline. Spotify removes Neil Young because it shows that there was drama, that there's this tension, that there's whatever. Where the music industry publication cannot do that. They can't afford to do that because their own informed readership know that that's not what happened, and they would lose
So
credibility.
Tyler,
Yeah.
if we go to this, the Sarah Palin thing, she's suing them for libel, and as a
Yes.
public figure, she has a high hurdle to get over.
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah,
and
she's not
she
likely to
might get
win.
over it with this situation.
Yeah.
But I think if you look at this situation, it gets to my earlier point. There's magnitudes of incorrectness or magnitudes of whatever you want to call this.
Yes.
Okay, and I think like the Sarah Palin thing is much more way off than the Neil Young thing. The
Yeah.
situation I gave you earlier for what I had with Business Insider was much more way off.
Yes.
And so I mean, I think we got to put things in some sort of proportion.
Fair
I
enough.
mean,
Here's my point.
yeah.
But I agree with you 1,000%. My point is that while this might be a less egregious example, it's still egregious enough that it's has real consequence. Is my point. Is that the expectation? We have now reached a level where it is happening at such a rapid pace that we let it go as if it's no big deal because it happened twice today. It'll happen twice tomorrow and four times, by the end of the week. And that is
What about
what is so concerning and
so
regrettable.
so Ty- so Tyler? What about the historic things like the Chicago Tribune saying, Truman loses, Dewey beats Truman. I mean, newspapers have been making mistakes for decades. I'm not sure. I mean, it's even that new. I mean, if we went back to
No, we used
1957,
to have copy editors, Ken, and managing editors. Right now, we have almost nothing between the story and its publication.
that's a good point.
Maybe one
That's a good.
layer of editing. So it's actually much worse. I taught journalism and I had to
You're probably
stop
right
about
about that.
3 years
Yeah.
ago.
This
Dr. Francine, can you?
well,
I'm
I
sorry.
sound like I'm complaining, and don't get me wrong, I'm complaining because to me this is a concernable development in society because the role of journalism is so fundamentally important to a functioning democracy. Don't get me wrong. At the same time, yes, Willie, hold on 1 second, Willie. Uh, and while at the same time, it gives us our bread and butter is doing exactly this. I mean, this is what a lot of what we do every day is do the due diligence and the discovery to figure out what's really going on because we can no longer take most of these stories. If 2 of the top 10 we ourselves were able to discern are patently misleading, should we not then, and we do, by the way, assume that every headline that we read is to some degree misleading? Because by golly,
Of course.
of course we do.
Of course.
So that's why we gather here every day and do what we do, and we are grateful for that. But I fantasize of a day that we don't have to do this. By the way, but go ahead,
Yeah,
Willie.
but
Tyler,
Lala,
Tyler,
what can we do
That's
about it?
really
That's the
hard.
question. What can we
can I,
do about it?
Tyler, this is David on Clubhouse. Can I have a couple moments here?
Sure.
I wanted to ask Doc. I wanted to ask Dr. Francine that you did. Weren't you at the Walter Cronkite School, Dr. Francine?
I was.
Yeah, exactly. So for those of us who remember Walter Cronkite, those were back in the days where somebody super credible was speaking every night to to arguably the free world. But my point is this: the journalists are professional semantic magicians, or whatever word you want to use. They know what words they are using. They are trained. They are strategically picking words for a headline and arguably throughout everything that they write. And they get trained for that. We are in a new world with social media and amplification where every Tom, Dick, and Harry and whoever can just share their opinion, okay? But they don't have the training, we'll say, although they can certainly, on the job or on the whatever, kind of pick up their own expertise on it. But I want to use the word accountability because when we're talking about how the New York Times is in the courts with Sarah Palin, I mean, look at again, getting back to Rogan, right? And so I just think that we need to I envision kind of this 2x2 matrix of, there has to be some level of accountability for a certain, I don't know, a certain kind of content creator that could be professional media maybe versus a citizen, right? But we need
That's
some
what
level of
fact
go ahead, I'm
checkers.
sorry. Yeah, go ahead, Dr. Francine. I'm just trying to tee up a little
There,
kind of
I know,
there,
nuanced
David, but
conversation.
there
that's
is
what
actually fact checking.
checkers used to do. Fact checkers used to do that. Managing editors, copy editors, almost all of those are gone.
Dr.
Not at
Frank,
the Wall Street
can we,
Journal, though.
Can I
if you
just
could
just very
please
quickly
dig
that
a bit
in the
Hold on,
deeper.
U.S.
Hold on, Willie. I will go to Willie next. Go ahead, Alexandra, and then we'll go to Willie.
Okay, just very quickly. So the problem of incorrect reporting is very old. If anybody remembers the history of the muckrakers in the Progressive era, that's like a very old. And Upton Sinclair and investigative journalism really gets its start there. But there wasn't any regulation before that time regarding untrue facts. So from that era, we got this whole idea of fact checking. But more importantly, we have liability for platform distribution, right? For people who are design like if you spread news, right? If you're a publisher, thank you, that's the word I was looking for. Publisher's liability. There is publishing liability. This is the whole thing behind Section 230, is to protect them from publishers' liability because at the time that's all they were publishers of static information. This still remains. There's still liability for publishers, which is why you see retractions in papers.
The the issue with retractions, of course, is that the publishers get to choose where they appear. So often in newspapers and things like that, they're like on the inside first page underneath, like statistics of some sort. So, very few people are looking at it, but they are there and they have have recanted. So all publishers, and this includes news, and that's why there was, firing Dan Rather and whatever, like there is this liability that still attaches. The difference right now is that because the newspapers didn't predict how much content was going to flow through through online, and they didn't charge for online content, people all expect free online content, and there's no requirement that distinguishes opinion from fact. Even unless it is an op-ed paper in a publisher, everything is presumed factual and has to be fact-checked. If it's not fact-checked, that just goes to its liability issue. But it has to be fact-checked to prevent it to prevent statements from being published that are not factual. If they choose not to employ fact checkers, they just open themselves up to more liability. The requirement isn't to have fact checkers. The requirement is to have liability, so that you have to put something in place to guard against untrue statements. And if you have untrue statements, then you have to recant, or you suffer the consequences. So anyway, this is not to say that there's any sort of hold on, I gotta help my daughter. But this is not to say that this is new or anything like that. It's just that because there's no clear lines of what's supposed to be factual, what's supposed to be opinion, and people who have broad platforms don't have a publisher's liability. That should happen, right? You should have liability for manipulating markets, and you should have liability for posting opinion as fact if you have a broad platform. But that's ended with the era of CNN and Fox News, and we have
Section
just a mess now.
230. Section
No,
230, right?
Section 230. No, yeah. So that's basically just about platforms not moderating, but that isn't actually what protects, like the Fox newscasters or Joe Rogan saying all sorts of untruth information about immunizations, all that stuff. That's not under Section 230. That's different. But and it's because if you saw the Alex, what the hell was his Infowars guy, the Alex Infowars, you know what I'm talking about. That
Alex
guy,
Jones.
Alex Jones.
that guy. So when he went to trial, it was what the protection they use is that it's entertainment, not that it is reportage. And they said he lost that, right? But that is the distinction is. And that's what Fox News is protected from, and a lot of the people who have extreme opinions that are not backed by fact. And I'm not just picking on Fox News. There's a lot of them out there. But what they do is they say that they're based on entertainment, not in reportage. So there's different clauses that you can fall under, but they don't make clear, like there's nothing that requires them to say, this is for entertainment purposes only. I am not a provider of facts. None of that stuff. So anyway, that's kind of where we are in terms of liability. But this is a very old issue, and things that need to be corrected are generally something I would hope on social media that labels things clearly: opinion, 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 fact, 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 right? So that if someone's trying to portray it as fact, then it becomes liable as reportage. But if so, like with a broad platform, there should be like a minimum number, and if you have that many or more followers, then if you put in something that is that you make it seem like it's fact, you have to have the same stuff that ads do, like infomercial or whatever. They have to put something that says this is an advertisement, this is not reporting or whatever. They have to put something in there that says this is opinion, not fact. But that doesn't exist right now. But it should,
Yeah,
in my opinion.
Alexandra. Now, to dig a bit deeper, I'm now on
Let's not hang on,
Verge.com.
Willie. We don't need to really dig much deeper than Alexandra just did. Just for the record,
No, really, there's another point. It's all about the attention wars.
there's
And
other
what about
headlines.
liability?
That's fine, but this is not. We're not doing a 3-hour room on
Yeah,
art journalism.
Tyler, you started it over again. So just one word: attention economy and the dilemma of huge platforms, because there are stars like Rogan and Neil Young are not on the same value set, now there's a dilemma for such a monopolistic platform. Who should survive this war? And this should not happen. This is all what I want to say. And this means to dig deeper because it has to do with monopolization of the platforms. If we would have a lot of platforms like Spotify, we might not have the problem maybe. Thank you.
Yeah, you know what I would love to see happen next is Joe invite Neil on the Joe Rogan podcast, and I imagine that might happen. And I'll bet you that would be a fantastic, one of the best episodes to ever. I mean, he's done 1,000 episodes, and it would likely be one of the best he's ever done, by the way, because Neil's a fantastic person to talk to in long form like that, and people would be in for a real treat. And by the way, I have a prediction: they would get along fabulously. By the way. So I really do hope that happens, and that would be a great. I'm so optimistic in my prediction. I'm so confident in my prediction that I'm even exuberantly optimistic for how that will pan out, and it would I hope leave a beautiful visual for everybody to experience.
Neil Young is a great feuder. Remember his feud with Leonard Skinner, and they both became huge fans of each other? Yeah. He's great at feuding.
He is. I mean, he's exactly. We've made that point multiple times today and yesterday that this is classic Neil in what he's doing, and he's playing the 4D chessboard. You have to give the guy a little more credit. Go back and read the Wikipedia page, and go. If the diehard fans like myself and Dr. Fran seem to know that Neil will always ends up winning in the end, even though he might appear to be losing in the short term. So.
Exactly. We now have lossless audio.
Yeah. The Pono had to come in somewhere here. Yes, exactly right. By the way, yes, the fact that you have lossless audio now coming to Spotify and Tidal and others in some part is actually due to Neil Young. By the way. So anyway, the next article that we can get into is that Bloomberg says they have sources that somebody named Putin plans to tax and regulate crypto mining, confining it to regions with electricity surpluses. Well, that's kind of brilliant, I got to say. Rejecting a central bank proposal to ban mining. There you go. If you got extra electricity in some areas, go ahead and use that unspent energy on crypto mining. Might as well, by the way, because this happens, by the way. In some areas, you have some power plants that are generating more power than they actually need. We'll flip that stuff into some Bitcoin mining while you're at it. That happens.
That even applies to solar, Tyler.
Yeah.
Sorry, am I interrupting the middle of your thing?
I'll give if you don't mind, I'll give the exact solar analogy because I run my entire resort 100% on solar. And what happens every day at around noon, my batteries are full and the sun is still shining. What am I to do? Well, I could set up a crypto rig and start mining crypto, and that's free energy that I have no better use for. It's just going into nowhere. It's not being caught into the batteries, and I don't have enough appliances running to utilize it all. So I might as well add some crypto rigs to the thing. Well, that can happen on a municipality scale as well. Let's go ahead, Beth.
I was just going to say that latitude plays a big part into this. So if you're at the equator, obviously the sun rises and sets the same time every day. Cool. When you're trying to do solar at latitudes like I am in the UK, over 52 degrees latitude, I have to have an array that's 8 to 10 times bigger than it needs to be to get me through the winter. So in the summer, I'm producing 8 to 10 times more power than I'm going to need in the winter. Gives a big problem as to what do you do with that. And the financial opportunity of turning some of that into a solid cryptocurrency income is an interesting option. It makes it worth considering having a solar array that big if you've got the room for it. Wow, my throat's giving up. I'll pause for a second.
Well, while you pause for a second, two possible considerations. One is get into some very cheap long-term storage, like the what do they call that, Rust battery storage, or use that excess energy in the summer to pump water up a hill, which is a form of energy storage, and then let it run downstream in the winter when you need it to run a turbine that you could then convert back into energy.
Yeah, so but Tyler, that's the big issue is energy storage. I mean, that's what everyone's trying to get at is energy storage. You
Yes,
can
but
also,
if you have enough acreage, you can use water pumps to move water up elevation, store it at a higher elevation, release it at the higher elevation whenever you want to in the winter, and it will turn for what you could think of as a water wheel or
Yeah, that was my first thought here, but the physics of it really likes scale. So that works in North Wales in a place called Llanberis, where they pump an entire lake, basically. Massive turbines pump an entire lake, and it works brilliantly. But like here at home, if you take, say, an Arctic truck worth of water, 40 tons of water, and lift it up to the top of a high tree, maybe 20 meters, then you only get like half a day of our typical use, maybe a day. So a truck of water at the top of a tree only gives us a day, unfortunately. We need thousands of tons of water, a lot higher than that. And where we live, it's completely flat. So I guess it's unique to everybody having to look at their own energy challenge. But you've certainly got me thinking, Tyler, with the whole self-sufficiency thing. So, yeah, cool.
all right, next
Yeah,
article.
I was going to add. Sorry, I was going to add. Paul, Tyler, I was going to say, but this is a great opportunity for emerging markets to increase their use cases for doing off-grid solar, right? Because typically, say in a village in Africa, the big barrier is having the upfront capital to support the installation of solar to power the village, which they usually is typically very low, right? They're not necessarily powering the same appliances me and you, Ben and Tyler, are using every day, right? They typically maybe have a TV, maybe a small fridge in a small village. The income's not even high enough to justify, and as we know, income does mirror energy uses. But if the country adopts, these microgrids, decentralized across the villages, typically in Africa, I think it's 18% of Africa is on the grid. So there's a huge opportunity to actually go decentralized. And as Ben said, we're on the right part of the equator, right? As far as, so latitude wise, we're in the right place. You could actually make a lot of these villages and off-grid locations our business cases by adding the crypto side to it. So yeah, I was actually thinking about this even for like some of the remote national parks where vehicles in the future, EVs could arrive. Typically they'd have to truck in fuel to power the Land Cruisers and etc. to go around showing people around the game parks. But you could potentially do a solar sort of power grid, but subsidize the rural villages nearby or the park itself if they need it. Yeah, so I just wanted to add that as well.
Very cool.
Can I add a comment on the Putin Kazakhstan thing?
Go ahead, Piotr.
Yeah, just quickly. I mean, I think there's a reason why Putin's a little bit more in favor of not banning this, and I think it has to do with a little bit with Kazakhstan. Given what we saw happen in Kazakhstan, 2-3 weeks ago, one of the driving factors of the protests was obviously the reduction in energy support, but also to do with the crypto mining. When China banned it, Kazakhstan jumped up to second place, about 18% share of the cryptocurrency market. But Russia's in third place. And what did Putin do? Well, he sent CSTO troops in to help quell the instability. Now, I've been reading some interesting articles that may have something to do with the fact that Russia wants to expand its influence in the crypto space as well. So I think that Putin is pushing back against the central bank because he's eyeing influencing Kazakhstan as well. And obviously, if the central bank bans crypto mining in Russia, that's going to affect the influence in Kazakhstan. So I think this is part of the reasoning behind Putin's thinking here. But just more of a theory than an actual fact. But some interesting ones that I read. Just something to think about.
Appreciate it. So now we get into the tweets that everyone's been sharing since we met last time, and which everyone's been waiting for, and some particularly good ones today. Like this one, Eric IO sends in that I'm retweeting from Science Daily that epidemiologists develop advanced state-of-the-art tool for measuring the pace of aging called Dunedin Pace. Reveals wide range of population aging rates and can predict future disease and mortality. Researchers developed a new blood test to measure the pace of biological aging based on analysis of chemicals and whatnot. Thank you for that one, Eric. And Amazon founder Jeff Bezos is expanding his free preschool program. A free nonprofit preschool program launched by Amazon co-founder Jeff Bezos is coming to Houston this fall. The city of Houston announced the 10-year lease agreement with Bezos Academy on Wednesday for a Montessori-inspired preschool in Houston. There we go. So retweeting that one. And the next one is from the Wall Street Journal. Speaking of Amazon, that Amazon faces unionization battle in Staten Island. The National Labor Relations Board, the NLRB, says nascent Amazon labor union has enough support from workers to hold election. A group of Amazon workers pushing to unionize a large company warehouse in New York won enough support to hold an election, the NLRB said, opening a new battlefront between employees and the e-commerce giant. Supporters of the nascent union, which calls itself the Amazon Labor Union, you got to admire the creativity of that, whoever came up with that name, met the requirement for such a vote, the NLRB said on Wednesday, which typically requires signatures from 30% of eligible employees at the facility. Organizers are aiming to unionize thousands of employees at the company warehouse in Staten Island. An Amazon spokesperson said the company is skeptical that the union has obtained enough legitimate signatures and is seeking to understand how the signatures were verified. Quote, we poured our blood, sweat, and tears into this campaign, and this shows when we come together, we can do anything, says Chris Smalls, a former Amazon employee leading the union, said Wednesday. A federal hearing is scheduled for February 16 to work out parameters for an election, according to the NLRB. Amazon in the coming months also faces a vote to unionize a facility in Bessemer, Alabama, after a federal labor official in November found the company violated labor law during an election held at the site a year ago, which we covered in real time as it happened. And it wasn't a year ago. I remember it intimately. We went over that one for a whole week. That was back around April or May of 2021. So about 9 months ago. And indeed, there is going to be a revote there. And there's now going to be a vote ostensibly in Staten Island. It didn't pass last time in Alabama. And the argument is that Amazon had too strong of a hand in discouraging their workers from unionizing. And so that's why they need to do the revote. And time will tell. But the real question here is, and this is interesting, and this for sure is not mentioned in this Wall Street Journal article, but it's probably the most interesting thing about all of this, is that the journalists who covered the Alabama voting and the aftermath of the supposed overbearing influence of Amazon in the outcome of that vote, which were two separate stories. There was the vote, and then there was the accusations later that Amazon had too strong of a hand in discouraging them from unionizing. Those are two separate stories. But in all of that, the journalists who covered those stories, of which there were dozens, right, were somehow magically invited to Seattle, to Amazon H Global headquarters, to meet with the new Amazon CEO, who was replacing Jeff Bezos, to see the newest, shiniest Amazon warehouse, and to bring their best photographer and to bring the photographer's most expensive lens. And they did appear at the new Amazon warehouse, many of them, and they were given a debut, a private open kimono session of Amazon's shiniest, newest toy, which is their newest factory fulfillment center. And it turns out there's something remarkably unique about this newest Amazon fulfillment center, which is it has no people. And then you look at the journalists who were invited to cover it, which were the journalists who covered the unionization efforts. Oh, wow. I wonder if that's a coincidence. What an interesting coincidence. The journalists who covered the unionization are covering the new factory that has no humans? But that Amazon's going to let these people unionize? What happens if the factory does vote? Well, one thing that might happen, and this is open for debate, is what happened when Walmart has hundreds of locations across America, and Walmarts have been trying to unionize for decades. And one of them did once upon a time. One warehouse location, one Walmart location did pass a vote to unionize. Planes were flown in that evening. That Walmart was shut down and burnt to the ground in 24 hours, and everyone was fired instantly.
So, may I have 2 minutes or a minute? So, the path back to a multi stakeholder form of capitalism, that context requires a recognition of labor in some way. Full stop. So, these are great conversations to have. For so I'll kind of just put a couple more little nuggets on here. I hope somebody finds some glimmer in the nuggets. What we've seen with automation, with the rise of tech, I've seen it for not quite 40 years, but automation's awesome. Automation and globalization together are painful, right? But something that people are waking up to, people meaning municipalities, who are so eager. Oh, Amazon, come on! What was it like even 2 years ago or 3 years ago? You're bringing jobs. What was that? New York City, you remember? Yeah, you're bringing jobs. Yeah, no, they're not. Okay, just by what you just said. So something that was kind of inspired by this room, and I had chimed in on it, is tax automation. Municipalities, when you have an automated factory, no one's paying taxes. So this is another cost of doing business with Amazon, and it's a cost of doing the business in our socioeconomic model we have here. So I'll just land the plane there, which is everybody start talking about this automation tax. If you're going to automate, whoever you are, you've got to still be supportive of your community that you reside in. I'm David on the Clubhouse side. I'm done speaking.
Hey, David, as an ex-New Yorker, very familiar with the Amazon situation. They were absolutely going to put jobs in there. I think the legitimate criticism is that the state was giving them tax subsidies to do it. Okay, so they're basically buying it. But they were going to actually have real jobs and weren't opening an automated plant in New York.
Yeah, but so that's what they were saying with their model of their current warehouse, right? So totally agreed. And you know what? You bring up like a totally important point, which is municipalities compete with each other, right? In terms of, hey, no taxes over here, you don't pay any taxes, right? And so what's wrong with that game? That game, we all pay the price on that game, right? In terms of our own personal healthcare costs as contractors or this or whatever. The model, we need to really have more conversations about our current model and how do we get to a more equitable model. But thank you, Ken, for the share.
But
Can I
David, I
chime
mean,
in?
go ahead.
So I'm sorry, just very, very quickly to support what David was saying there, but also to say that we've known about automation for decades. We've known that this is the way things are going. We've known about robots. We didn't know what they would look like. We didn't know what they'd be able to, but we knew about this. Why has nothing been thought through, thought about, and created to support workers who are at the lower end of the pay scale and will be completely overwhelmed by the new automation when it arrives? So, what's wrong with us that we haven't used our time well? That goes for climate change, by the way. Thank you.
Yeah, David, on this particular point, like in terms of actually taxing automation, I mean, it's like saying that taxing, innovation, I mean, anything is going to be actually sort of like criminalized and, in a way that if you're going to be ultimately doing something new or which is going to actually make the process effective, is going to ultimately, you're going to pay more money towards it. I mean, this is a no-go. I mean, seriously, I don't know why people are suggesting that in terms of that, yes, it's going to have impact, in the community level, but look at it from the perspective that it's going to actually bring in one way or another those jobs. So the people who are actually going to be in the conveyor belt, kind of like a job, they have to actually get and acquire more knowledge and get a skill set on the side where these factories could be hacked. These factories could be like some sort of ransomware would come in. You just have to actually change your skill set. This is what we are talking about. It's not actually sort of taking away the job. It's just like get yourself trained in some other field, which is going to be effectively going to be used in the future. So taxing automation is effectively taxing innovation.
Karam, what we are going back and forth on is one of the discussions of our civilization at this moment. That is the context of this conversation that you and I are going back and forth, because I will fall on the sword on how we need to define a new system, right? People talk about systems change in a way that is equitable to our natural system, Mama Gaia, and our social system amongst each other. Brother, with full respect for you and your opinion and everything, I would just like to share what I've seen over through my walk in the woods, right? And we are on dangerous grounds with what you're describing. The idea, and this has been what the Silicon Valley specific spin on the rise of corporate capitalism has been exactly what you said, which is innovate. And for lots of reasons. There's a bunch of benefits. It's great. There's jobs. There's STEM. There's high-paying jobs. Lots of great benefits. But there's this other cost. All right. What is the cost of innovation? I think is a great way to kind of frame this. It cannot be run away like fossil fuels has been. Look what that's doing to us, right? I mean, the externalities and things like that. So, and I would just I'll land this with one thing, which is back when I was at Stanford Business School, is when the EU was signed, right, like 30 years ago, and then NAFTA was a few years after that. And in NAFTA, okay, it was done a little differently. There was no movement of people across the border. There was corporate capitalism put a nice wall. You want to build a wall, Trump? You already built it. It's the corporate capitalism already built it to lock in Mexican labor for lower cost. And so there is a cost to that. Look at the populist movement that, basically Trump was able to cultivate because our form of capitalism has left a lot of people out. That my little data point here is there was a whole kind of part of that story of like, oh, get retraining. Oh, it's all becoming a whatever service economy. The economists had really thought through a lot of it, but not all of it. And because they did not do all the calculus of it, we had huge industrial sectors that were outsourced, but also the automation was brought out of Pandora's box, and without any level of taxing on it, taxes are just a tool. Without any level of thought about the municipal tax hit or this or that, there's a little bit more calculus, I believe, in a more multi-stakeholder form of socioeconomic model that we need to kind of reconcile it. But bro, high five, high 10 and all that, it's a conversation we need to cultivate more often. Thanks.
Hey,
But
David,
just quickly,
you're also saying it's suggesting that it's being approached at a holistic high level and that they forgot to consider a few things. It's actually not, it's approached piecemeal, and that's part of it. And as you guys are alluding, there's different factors or different stakeholders here. There's technology and innovation versus sort of social sciences and sociology and community. There's a lot of different factors and stakeholders here. And so, yes, this conversation needs to be had, but I think thinking that they're going to tax this is sort of pie in the sky. We already have a lot of the corporate tax structure is already very extremely favorable to corporations. They're not going to come in and, this is not the highest priority, maybe addressing the tax schema as it already is. But yeah, so I mean, I agree. Technology can be furthered, and whose responsibility is it? And us talking about it will get it more forefront. And also with Trump, he's not only, getting to, I think you're suggesting a disillusion or people that felt that they were behind. Trump's agenda was just to create divisiveness regardless. And so there's plenty of people that were far ahead that are also Trump supporters because of his tax breaks. So his was just divisiveness. And that is actually a large concern in society right now, is that everybody's getting very tribal and protecting their community and their tribe, whatever that may be, however they identify. And then back to your earlier comment on municipalities fighting against each other. Again, you've got states that fight against each other for business, and they do that through mechanisms such as different privacy laws that are more favorable in one state versus another. And you will have businesses, located in those states because, which it arguably doesn't even make any sense since anything that's on the web is going to be extending far beyond any state. But that things aren't addressed holistically, and that's part of it. And there are challenges in trying to do that. There would be huge challenges, but yes, the conversation needs to be had and kept going.
And just
And it
quickly
all
on
brings
this
us back.
particular point, just David, quickly on this particular point, that's that problem, that particular problem you referred to is America's problem. We do not have that problem, like for instance in Scandinavia or Europe. Like if you look at it in Scandinavia, they don't have any problem. If you bring in automation, you bring in whatever, France has got 2 months off, like in a year. So you have to understand that this whole some picture where the U.S. is going to be ultimately being affected because of the automation and innovation and new corporates coming in and taking jobs and all that, that is America's problem in terms of the true capitalism. It's just something needs to be fixed in America. I mean, this particular model has been working very, very successfully in the other parts of the world. Scandinavia, look
Or
at it. I mean, this is perfectly
It's
working.
so they
I
pay a
disagree.
huge amount of taxes, and Tyler can chime in if he cares to on that part with regards to tax structure in European countries. But as a production, right? It's a good question of production and manufacturing and things like that. If that's the role that the automation is going to start to take place. So again, this is a much richer, deeper, super big topic that really demands the nuance. But I love having this conversation.
Yeah, David, I agree. And we will have surely in this year definitely a discourse about robotaxis, I'm betting, because all kind of states, because of the COVID crisis, have a lot of debt. And then if the tax input is decreasing, it's a natural that's coming. And we always have these headlines now about automation. It isn't a next wave of automation. We had always automation since 50 years, but now this is really a big wave which is involving the AI, which means cognitive technologies, and is even attacking the middle class, not the blue collar class, but the white collar class. And the last thing, in 2017, there was the first discussion in the European Union about a robot tax or an automation tax. Just to correct you, Karam, because every economy has the same problem. Automation, by definition, means replacement of human labor. By definition, the only question is, can we balance it with creating new jobs? And this is an ongoing discussion of a lot of experts. And I did not read Mr. Schwab's Great Reset book. Sorry for that. I should have. But probably there is a chapter about it because he and his experts have also thought about the future, and it's inevitable to have a new, as David says, recognition of the, say, role of labor in society when it's actually no longer guaranteed to have labor. Yeah, that's my 2 cents. Thank you for listening. I'm going to the audience. I have to go soon. Thank you.
Okay, so on this point, actually, it's a very perfect segue into the next article. It's a tweet from our friend Bibi from the BBC. I love it when that happens. And the headline is Musk, robots to be bigger business than Tesla cars. In an earnings call, Elon Musk talks up his plans to build humanoid robots, but what's involved? It's the BBC article, and once you crack it open, it talks about how they debuted the Optimus robot with the dancing human and whatnot. Notably, Musk said that the not yet built 5'8" robot would have a screen on its face and be able to lift 150 pounds and travel at about 5 miles per hour. So, you could run away from it and avoid, the robotic apocalypse. And this week, Mr. Musk told investors the humanoid robot's first application would be at a Tesla plant, obviously, moving parts around the factory or something like that. Makes sense as a beta test. But in the future, he sees it helping solve labor shortages. And earlier this week, he tweeted that Tesla AI might play a role in AGI, artificial general intelligence, given that it trains against the outside world, especially with the advent of Optimus. Tesla AI, he said exactly that. And there was another tweet that he did with Tasha Keeney, who's a covers autonomous technologies for ARK Invest, and so she knows the space. And Elon responded to her tweet thread by saying, um, Optimus, which is the Tesla robot again, will greatly exceed even her expectations. As she mentions in her tweet thread, the economy will be as big as people want it to be because you have unlimited free labor, ostensibly. There will be no scarcity, again, because unlimited. I think this is pending unlimited energy, by the way, which could happen if we cover the planet with solar panels or wind farms or nuclear technologies or God, let's all pray that we get cold fusion happening. He says there will be no scarcity except that which is artificially created. And technically, he's correct. If we given unlimited energy and unlimited robots, which the type that he's envisioning, if you can replicate them endlessly, and they're able to, you have unlimited free labor and free energy, then of course he's right. You would have essentially no scarcity of anything. It's the asymptotic or hyperbolic growth, essentially, escape velocity on the growth. So,
Tyler, will
yes,
that then lead to people being restricted to how many babies they can have? Because it'll be like it'll be Brave New World in another way.
hard to say how different governance structures will be impacted by this, but that's kind of the latest on that topic. Meanwhile, with regard to SpaceX, there is an out-of-control SpaceX rocket on collision course with the moon. Falcon 9 booster launched from Florida in 2015 to deploy Deep Space Climate Observatory has followed chaotic orbit ever since, and it will soon crash into the moon. And then Thomas Tong found the next interesting article about one that we read a month ago, that Intel made a rather impressive headline and hard to swallow headline that their latest Core i9 chip outperforms Apple's M1 Max chip. And benchmark tests are in, and the results are in. And the question is Intel lying or not? And I have to hand it to our brilliant cast and crew here on stage, who we even predicted the outcome of this benchmarks when the headline was initially announced, when Intel came out bragging that their new chips are going to outperform Apple's M1 Max, which are incredibly powerful. And I believe it might have been Jonathan, because it's kind of his ballpark, who said that, well, indeed, Intel might outperform, but the question is at what power requirements. Again, almost back to the previous article about unlimited power. If you have unlimited power, of course, those chips can outperform anything. So the benchmarks confirm that Intel's latest Core i9 chip does outperform Apple's M1 Max chips. Kind of remarkable. However, they are just 4% faster when using 250% more power consumption or more energy. 40 watts for the Apple chips versus 100 watts for the Intel chips, sometimes peaking at 140 watts. So there you go. When you kind of leave that critical important detail of the overwhelming power consumption, which is generally
But if you
something.
need a cold, if you're in a cold climate, you need that extra heat for warmth or
Sure
keeping your
you do,
tea
Evan. Fair enough.
or coffee warm, or come on.
Hey, it's a free coffee heater built right into the laptop. Go
That
wrong.
is easier to crash, right, with heat.
Yeah. So the next one is from Thomas Tong. But by the way, that my point is that was predicted when Intel made that kind of surprising announcement that their chips were going to outpace Apple's new chips. And we said, yeah, they're probably just going to use 10 times the electricity. And indeed, that is what the benchmarks now say. So
Oh,
Bentley,
they could just add a little coffee warmer on the computer. It would be great, like a little coffee machine. That's awesome.
yeah,
Double, like it's multitasking at its finest.
it's the new.
Hi, gang. You know exactly why it consumes so much more energy. It's because they need to keep Microsoft happy. because Microsoft is not going to do the Apple thing to upgrade their operating systems to something that is not backwards compatibility.
Ah.
So the Intel chips need to keep things since the 8088s from the 70s
Mm.
still in the chip. So that's why you are done.
Oh, good point.
Isn't Sweden like powering homes with data center excess energy? I
Fair
read an
enough.
article about that. So
Well, that's our dear friend Sam Cole, who Johan probably knows as well, who speaks at many of my events, who was momentarily the biggest crypto miner in the world in northern Sweden, and indeed all of the heat from his crypto mining factories were powering the town near him. Yes, and he was the Sweden's largest power consumer as well for a while. Exactly right. And Sweden does do lots of things like that, where factories sell the heat waste as energy and things like that. Thomas Tong found the next one that Bentley, the luxury car maker, is building a residential tower to be just as luxurious as its cars. Let me guess, Dubai? Luxury car maker Aston Martin and Porsche have dipped their toes into architectural design, and now Bentley Motors is getting into the act too. As luxury car makers are getting into building buildings. By the way, because you have a whole lot of combustion engineers who are no longer building combustion engines for reasons you might be able to figure out because you're a smart little cookie like that, right? To that point, there's another article tweet that somebody found. Here it is, and it was BB, and it's from Reuters that new EV owners resist buying gasoline cars. Survey shows first-time owners of electric vehicles were reluctant to switch back to gasoline-fueled cars, even as concerns continue to loom about the availability of charging stations. So that's why you know that the combustion engineers at these car companies are now building buildings because they're no longer needed in the way that they used to be. They'll have to find new things to build.
And they're definitely good at 3D model programs, though.
Yeah. So the next article is also from from the BBC. I love how that happens. Google being slammed over ad cookie replacement flip flop is the headline from the BBC. The system Google planned to replace cookies with, which was FLoC, FLOC, Federated Learning Cohorts, is now itself being replaced with a slightly different idea. Yes, we read that headline 48 hours ago that Google was getting a whole lot of heat for their cookie replacement system called FLoC, and very notably in Germany, and very notably from the publishers, and most of all from Axel Springer, who is sort of the big dog in media in Europe, honestly. Axel Springer is incredibly politically powerful. And Axel Springer got together with all of the other German publishers to go to Berlin and Brussels to say, hey, Google's new cookie alternative is doing us wrong, y'all. It's basically taking away the cookie data that we are dependent on. Do something about it. And the EU does do something about it. When Axel Springer jumps, Brussels says how high. So they went to Google and said, hey, Google, you can't just cut out all of that juicy data that our media moguls are dependent on. So Google is now coming up with an alternative, which is based on profiling of 300 different types of websites that you visit. We read this headline 48 hours ago, and now the BBC is covering it. And indeed, Google is now getting a lot of attention from policymakers about how exactly they track users and how that tracking is shared with publishers, especially in Europe, who's dependent on those data for their ad networks and everything else. And the new system is quite wild. They're going to make 300 different types of categories for all websites to fit into, and then you will be tracked for a limited time. They will share the types of websites you visit, like naked oil wrestling, with publishers, and then they will be able to target you based on the types of website categories that you habit.
Of course, the guys already had found a way to actually filter these queries going past the networks as well. So yeah, it's as dead as flock. You are done.
Yeah, I mean, Google's getting all the power for their own ad network, and they're just limiting the power to the competing ad networks. Make no mistake about it; it's just a power play ultimately, and they could take it all, but the politicians will scream bloody murder. Actually, the publishers will scream bloody murder, as Axel Springer's doing, and that'll put pressure on the politicians, who will then put pressure on Google to say you're acting like monopoly, and so there has to be a sort of friendly compromise to keep the publications from going out of business. You see where this is all going, right? Now you see why all this antitrust pressure is developing on Google. You see what's going on here? Okay, good. So the next one is that Amazon, this is from Reuters, from PT Yoder, that Amazon and Whole Foods can be sued by a murderer who was rejected for a delivery job. Because they like murdering, and you can't. Who are you to not allow murderers to deliver groceries? I mean,
It
where
has
do
to be California, right? I'm just guessing.
you... So a federal judge said Amazon and its Whole Foods unit can be sued over the refusal to hire a convicted murderer who claimed to be rehabilitated after nearly 23 years in prison. Aha! That's the interesting bit. It's because once you've done your time for the crime, you've paid your debt to society. So you cannot be that cannot be.
Yeah, Tyler, this goes to the whole not hiring felons. I mean, everybody goes through a background check when you go into any job, and pretty much felons are just knocked off the list. If they can't get jobs when they come out, then how are they supposed to reintegrate into society? And you can get in. This is a whole prison uh, system debate discussion. But if the prison system has decided that he's rehabilitated, then it's served its purpose, right? And he's got to be able to get a job somehow. So
I
I
mean,
think that's a clickbaity headline.
the fact of the matter is
Uh,
the guy is a killer delivery driver. I mean, what else can you say?
well, so I think that Jennifer's point is actually, I mean, that's totally at the heart of what is happening with the prison system, that it's being used for political action, and it's also people from reintegrating into society. This is the whole block the box movement. It's not for people who are considered dangerous to society, but truthfully, if you're still considered a danger to society, you should still be in prison. You shouldn't have been paroled or released in any
Right.
way, right? If you're still dangerous, if you're not sane, or like, there are ways to keep people who are considered an active danger away from society. But there is this concept of rehabilitation that we do very poorly in the U.S. and other countries, including Scandinavia, do so well. But for the most part, we basically create laws that are so restrictive in nature, so they'll actively target particular populations with the sole purpose can't vote while in jail, and then they can't vote out of jail. So they're completely stripped of civilian rights. And you can actually see how targeted it is. Someone did a map of all the federal prisons. And when you find a poorly populated white area with a bunch of people who turn out to be, who are black and Latino, that's a prison. You could identify them strictly by demographics. That is how targeted they are. It was shocking. I'll find the study and send it so that it can be pinned at some point if you want. But it's a very, I mean, this is a very deliberate action. You can go through the tapes around the Nixon era to figure out exactly how deliberate this was. This is not, like, it's very easy to simplify this by saying somebody has a record, therefore they are that person forever, or they're just a killer. Like, a lot of felons are drug users. They're not people who've actively harmed anyone but themselves. Drug use actually is not something that, in my opinion, should be a felony. If you're only harming yourself, how are you a danger to society? I don't understand. But for the most part, this is definitely used as a weapon against populations to make sure that political power stays intact. So I think it's anytime someone brings something up by saying, no, this is atrocious, how could you possibly consider this? Well, there are so few avenues for people to get work. There are so few areas that they can live, that you're basically just saying, well, the only place for you is prison. Welcome back. So it's a very serious topic.
No, it's
Alexander,
hugely serious, and prisons are private, right? So that's a private system. So they are private or quasi, quasi-private. Again, it's in their incentive to keep people in. It's not easy to get out of prison. And if we as a society are going to say, what is the purpose of prison? Is it to rehabilitate? Is it to punish? Do we want to reduce recidivism, which is the return rate, et cetera? You have to have a path for integrating these people into society. So that was a very clickbaity title. It is really hard for someone, especially a murderer, someone who was convicted of murder, to get out of prison. So as Alexandra explained, they're not going to be let out if they're still a danger to society. So I think, as you know, he'd be a killer driver. That'd be awesome. He'd be brutally good. He'd be super incented and everything else. So it's a huge discussion, though. Our prison system is really a shit show, honestly.
Well,
So
you
prisons
can
might be
take it.
private, but
You can take it one step
what's not
further.
private is who put them there. So, guys, I have to say, I visited San Quentin, and when I went in and they clicked the gates behind you and said, just to remind you, this is a no hostage. I mean, so if you're taken hostage, they can keep you. Seven gates closed as they said this to us. Like, fair warning, if someone takes you hostage, it's you and him, and have it at, have at it. I'm sorry, I don't want a killer. Even if he's rehabilitated, I don't want a killer coming to my house to deliver groceries.
You don't know why he
He can
killed
be a,
Suzanne. You don't know what
you know
circumstances
what?
he was in or
Jennifer,
what the
you and I are going to
conviction was.
disagree on this
We're
one.
going to disagree. And it's a
Until you visit San Quentin, until you sit in a federal court, and I acted as an extern for a federal court judge. It's a whole different ballgame until you've actually been there and seen it. Not to say that I don't think he shouldn't have a job as a gardener. He can have a job as a gardener. I just don't want him delivering my groceries.
I mean, it's a fair point that people can restrict who, they want, or, if they have a particular preference, or maybe, like this grocery delivery service does not enter the home. But I used a moving service that's all ex-cons, and I recommend it to everybody. It's Delancey Street Movers.
ditto.
I have
Ditto. They were
no
awesome, Alexandra.
affiliation. You know the one
Michelle,
I'm
Ditto.
talking.
Yeah, I used them too. They were awesome. They
They're
were phenom.
phenomenal. They're the
They're
best movers.
phenom.
They are so
And I,
incentivized to be great at what they do and to be able to have a track record of being productive in society.
right.
Extremely polite. Like they're not doing anything that is, I mean, I have
No,
little kids. It's
Alexandra, I'm a single female sitting there with these five guys in my home, right? Like I didn't feel at all, and that's an example. And Suzanne, to your point, when I did lobbying, the California prison system was the biggest lobbying group in California. And to say that they're outdoing teachers and firemen and other groups is a really big statement. And that system, and yes, I have friends who've been to San Quentin, and I'm not going to have a one-off here. I can come up with a bazillion one-off or many one-off cases where people are in prison for reasons that they killed somebody, but they're not a quote killer, right? Maybe it was some self-defense, and they just happen to be, as Alexandra explained, certain demographics are targeted, and it's much harder to take care of
Those are the
themselves or be
one-offs,
represented.
Jennifer.
What?
Right, so I think this is a 50-50 issue. So the reason, me personally, I think the reason why the companies made this decision is because you don't, as you said, they could have got convicted for self defense, or they could have been like convicted for like an actual like actual murder. You know what I mean? So
drunk driving.
I
Yes.
think. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, you sound great.
Yeah, yeah. So, what? So me personally, I think the reason why the companies make these decisions is because there's a risk factor involved. So you don't know. I mean, you got two sets of killers. You got killers that could be safe to society, and then killers that are not safe to society. So they then make that decision to refuse murderers delivering, and I think like some murderers as well. Some of them get rehab. Some murderers get released and are still like they haven't been rehabilitated. They haven't learned a lesson. Some of them can come out and say, "Yeah, I've learned my lesson." So it's very risky, and I think that's why the companies have every right to make that decision. They have a liability to their customers. So I'm not saying that convicted murderers shouldn't get a job. They could get a job, but they could get a certain type of job. So I like my plane there.
All right.
And I have been in prison with a lot of, I mean, not, I haven't been imprisoned, right? But a part of our criminal law program was to go and work with federal prisoners. And we had conversations about all sorts of, the one thing that I thought the strongest point was that even though we grew up with like no money, I grew up with a very different kind of background than any of them did. All I could think of is like I got very lucky with who I grew up with, as opposed to they had like no avenue of escape. It's just a very different background. I think it's very hard to judge what made people do certain things. I mean, there's there are so many people who commit worse crimes. Like I keep thinking the Sackler family, right? They are responsible for destroying thousands of lives and they're not in jail, right? So, I mean, I think like if you're the person who actually holds the weapon versus the person who hires the person that holds the weapon, like how is that better? I don't really know. But anyway, okay, all of this is the only other thing I remember was that there's a painted line around 6 feet up where if anybody touches higher than that line, the guards will shoot them, no matter who it is. And I have never wanted to reach over a line so badly in my life. That says something about my personality, I'm sure, and I don't think it's good.
Okay, we're going to move on. The next one was from Thomas Tong. He found this one that fusion scientists in California make burning plasma breakthrough with a 129 laser experiment in what is considered a crucial step towards net fusion energy. As I was just discussing, scientists from the National Ignition Facility in California demonstrated burning plasma in the lab for the first time, a crucial step towards achieving practically limitless fusion energy, a report from the BBC explains. Nuclear fusion occurs when two atoms slam together to form a heavier nucleus, releasing vast amounts of energy. For decades, scientists have been attempting to harness the process, the same one used by the sun and the stars to produce energy. Now, according to a new study published in Nature, the scientific community has taken a crucial step towards self-sustaining fusion energy. The scientists at NIF, located at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory in California, showcased a method for heating plasma to the incredibly high temperatures required using the fusion reaction itself. Let's pray to God we are on the verge of this happening. Well, with baby steps, we continue to make little steps. That's great. If this happens in our lifetime, it'll be the biggest thing that has ever happened in all of our lifetimes, and in fact, probably in the history of humanity. Unbelievable that this could potentially happen in our lifetime. Anyway, the next one is from L. That scientists, in some other lab, no doubt, have regrown frog legs. Frogs briefly treated with a 5-drug cocktail, which allowed the frog to regrow a functional, complete limb. Scientists have triggered long-term growth of legs in adult frogs, which are naturally unable to regenerate limbs, obviously. Any child who grew up in my neighborhood knows that, by the way. So,
Are these French scientists by any chance?
and is there a new Kentucky fried leg chicken, frog leg chicken?
Oh, I like that.
Kentucky fried frog legs, coming to a city near you. The next one is
So about the frog legs. So does that mean that they will be able to grow human limbs as well?
that is very well done, DJ. That is the implication that we will all have frog
That
legs
would be
in
very
the future.
interesting to see. So basically, if you lose a limb,
No. Well, the implication is if you lose a limb, that you'll regrow frog limbs in their place.
yeah,
I think that's the implication.
that'd be a great movie.
It's a new Marvel film coming out. You can play the main star, DJ. The Poppy has the next one from The Guardian, that a robot successfully performs surgery on pigs without any human help. Machine was significantly better than humans, who are, I'm assuming, highly paid humans, at tricky procedure to connect two ends of an intestines inside of a pig. So we can now add very highly paid surgeons to the ever longer list of jobs that will soon be replaced by robotic arms. Robot successfully performs keyhole surgery on pigs without any human help and did it better than humans can. Did you get that part? The part where they did it better?
So one day you're going to have a frog heart, leg and a pig heart. Fantastic.
And if there's any surgeries need to be done, it'll be done by the robots. So, Evan, you have the next one from South China Morning Post about China's new crypto-free NFT platform soft launch, the Blockchain Service Network. The BSN has started testing its NFT minting and management system based on adapted blockchains that are not tied to any cryptocurrencies. Yes? There we go. Next is from Politico that Europe pitches tech principles to rule the internet. In a global race for technology, Europe bets on digital rights as a key selling point, is the headline. As geopolitical tensions over the control of technology rise, Europe is putting its foot down on how it wants the internet to run. The European Commission presented on Wednesday its so-called Digital Decade Principles, aimed at defining the 27-country bloc's vision of how the digital economy should abide by values such as democracy, privacy, solidarity, freedom of choice, and security. It's Europe's attempt at turning its approach to internet governance into the global standard. Quote, we aim to be the forefront of this global momentum and create something that allows us to take action on the ground and to take action together if we can inspire like-minded partners, says the Executive Vice President Margaret Vestager in a press conference on Wednesday. Internal Market Commissioner Terry Breton said the EU's digital constitutional basis would help promote democratic digital principles on the global stage. US tech giants like Google, Amazon, Facebook, Apple, and Microsoft now dominate the online world. And Chinese firms like Alibaba and Huawei, boosted by their strong domestic positions, have emerged as strong challengers in recent years. Do you notice what's missing from amongst those names, by the way? That's right. Europe is incredibly sore about the fact that they cannot seem to manage to create a global tech company. And that comes up in every lunch or coffee meeting I've had over the past decade in Europe, by the way. Just a little cultural context for you about how incredibly sore they are about this issue. And they have been scheming for a decade to figure out how to address this issue. And I've been telling you multiple times over the past 9 months that they're going to throw down some heavy regulation to restrict and hinder those massive big international tech companies to carve out a little space for some domestic decacorn creation. Right?
So, but I think what's also important about this story is that we do see this trend towards trade block co-regulation, and we see it like the security side on the U.S.'s part. They're having meetings with people in various trade blocks like the EU and other areas in order to conform regulations or at least regulatory enforcement. This isn't just, I think, a play on we need to make room for someone domestic, because I think that's already happening. I think what the other part of it is they're saying that they want other people to take on these standards, and that's happening too. So I think it's just important to note here that that this sort of overarching, if you want to attach to these particular Western markets, then you have to have these additional protections and guidelines and things like that. They're not kidding. They're really trying to enforce these much stricter standards. And the previous story with the tokenless blockchain, that's been coming for a little bit. There are several others that are coming on. It's actually pretty exciting.
It really is exciting that the EU is taking that steer and following up their GDPR processes and guidelines. This will probably turn out to be something that the rest of the world will join in on, and then Europe will be leading the way. I think that's fantastic. Thank you. Well done.
So one quick point is the Margaret Vestager, the person I named as the quote of that article, turns out she is the person in all of the entire EU system whose main responsibility for the past many, many years has been specifically reducing the power of American big tech companies, period. What an interesting coincidence. So the next paragraph says that this tug of war over how to govern the internet is expected to boil over in the coming year. Diplomats at the UN are starting discussions on a cybercrime treaty initiative proposed by Russia as a major Plenipotentiary Conference. Plenipotentiary, okay, we're creating neologisms here. At the ITU is scheduled for
No,
September.
that's a real.
Yeah, Plenipotentiary Conference. Okay, so anyway, the next article is from Evan about Facebook's strength in Africa. How Facebook, this is from The Guardian, how Facebook took over the internet in Africa and changed everything. Western users are logging off, but across the continent, the social media company is indispensable for everything from running a business to sourcing whatever. And yes, it's because they're providing free.
Hey, Tyler.
Yes, John.
Tyler. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I just looked up the definition of plenipotentiary, and I think it's very relevant to what you just read.
Okay.
The definition is a person, especially a diplomat, invested with the full power of independent action on behalf of their government, typically in a foreign country. I think it's fair to say that no such person would exist in the US to make those decisions unilaterally. So that's a non-starter constraint on that proposed process.
No, 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 no. Plenipotentiaries exist in all countries. They're basically a diplomat who has the power to bind the government, and that's something that everyone has, because otherwise you wouldn't be able to get anything through the executive branch done. So some diplomats have the authority to basically just take in requests. Some diplomats have the authority to take it and bind and have binding resolution, but only a certain type of request. And then some diplomats have this additional power where they can essentially bind on behalf of the government, and that could actually be, the Secretary of State has a plenipotentiary within a certain realm. So that's it's a very common thing. It's
I
just a
yeah,
word that I
I
many people.
I I I accept your clarification of the term and the practice. What I'm proposing is that the subject matter of the proposal is so incredibly controversial within and across political parties that finding an individual that could be vested with that kind of commitment, decision authority would be impossible in this context.
Okay, next article.
I think it's done a lot. So I don't think that that's necessarily, like, in very, very serious things, including things like UN resolutions. Like, there's that it's actually a fairly common practice. So I don't think it's as there isn't an area that is particularly unique. I mean, in areas even of war and stuff like that, then there's still someone who's vested with the power to handle that. So up to a certain point, usually, but usually, they are able to bind the government to a certain level. So it exists all over.
Okay, next article is from Evan from The Guardian. How Facebook took over the internet in Africa and changed everything. It says Western users are logging off of Facebook, but across the continent of Africa, social media company Facebook is indispensable for everything from running a business to sourcing vaccines. How did it become inescapable? The answer it should be very obvious to people who join us from Tech News Around the World every day, as I've said multiple times, including in the past couple of days. Facebook, and as Mabwana reminded us, and we talk about this from time to time, Facebook provides, due to, I no doubt the article doesn't mention this, Qualcomm created a technology that allows apps to pay for their own data. So Facebook can pay for the data that Facebook app uses on your phone without you doing anything. And they do that in the developing world to get people to use it. It's genius. And then what it has led to in places like Indonesia and Pakistan and the Philippines and many places in Africa is Facebook becomes the internet because it's the free internet. But you have to use the Facebook app, and that's what people use it for, everything, because it's for them becomes the whole internet because they don't want to pay for the non-Facebook internet, for lack of a better word. That's the reality. And the question is, does this article dive into this? And the answer is it does. On paragraph 1, 2, 3, 4, it finally says, after 4 very long paragraphs, that across Africa, Facebook is the internet. Businesses are and consumers depend heavily on it because access to the app and the site are free on many African telecom networks, meaning you don't need any phone credit to use it. In 2015, Facebook launched Free Basics, an internet service that gives users credit-free access on the platform. Yes, and that's why it takes over and becomes the internet in those countries where it does that. And they're very smart to have done that.
But
Anyway,
aren't they benefiting actually also collecting the data?
yeah,
That's
Right, of course.
That's what they are doing. It's not
They're,
really
no,
free, you know.
yes, yes, of course. They are able to monetize the data they get from you more than the cost of providing you
Exactly. Yeah.
the bandwidth. Now, why is that interesting to you? Here's why. Because the very same thing is likely to happen, a very similar thing is likely to happen in the metaverse with VR and AR, where it could, I'm predicting even, that it's very possible that Facebook will eventually give you the Oculus Quest 3 for free because they'll be able to monetize the data that you generate from it, just like they do with the smartphone data in developing countries. Do we get it? We get it. We got it. Is it clear?
Yeah.
I think it's clear. Great. Okay, great.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, that's quite interesting as well. That, in fact, in the Tech News Africa room yesterday, we were talking about Google just invested in South African gaming company as well. So there is like a scramble for African data, really. It's not only that. I think they raised 60 million or something like that. And then Oracle just announced that they are also setting a data center in South Africa as well. So it looks like the new scramble for African data, really. So that's
Okay.
quite interesting.
Next up is from L, who shares this interesting one that Germany puts a Russian scientist on trial for space tech espionage. German prosecutors say the accused Russian spy shared information about Europe's space rocket program to Moscow. And the next is from Wired, why the Belarus railway hack marks a first for ransomware. The politically motivated attack on the Belarus railways represents a new frontier for hacktivists and won't be the last of its kind. And indeed, it's very interesting. It's hackers playing a role in geopolitics, where hackers were able to stop trains of Russia sending in troops through Belarus by hacking the metro computer system, so that shut down the trains, so Russia couldn't bring in troops through Belarus in this, uh, you know, hopefully not a war developing in Ukraine. And so you've got hackers acting as activists playing a significant role in an unprecedented way. This is kind of the first of a kind of a known way where it's a group of hackers acting collectively to influence the outcome of conflict. Really interesting.
Right, and Tyler, there's plenty of hacktivist stuff, and you're pointing out that this is a good example of it. And as I alluded yesterday, or said yesterday, you have to be careful when people claim to be hacktivists that there aren't other reasons or backgrounds. But they said that in this case, this is exactly what they're claiming to be.
Okay, so check this out. There's now globally a new hashtag is trending. The hashtag Spotify deleted is now a globally trending hashtag. Spotify deleted. I'm just curious. Gee, I wonder what might they have deleted? What did Spotify delete? Did Spotify delete something recently? Deleting stuff? Is that what's going on? Because now you've got an entire population of idiots that have been intentionally misinformed.
Sponsored by Apple.
Do you see what has just happened? Because the mainstream media chose to take the clickbait version of the headline rather than the factual version of the headline, we now have a very misinformed population who has now created a hashtag. So we have a wildly misinformed population, and we just watched it happen in the past few hours. You see the problem? It's probably an isolated incident. It probably doesn't happen with any other medical issues, vaccines. Probably no. Don't worry, folks. This is a totally isolated incident that'll never happen again. Go ahead, go back to sleep. So the next one is that from Professor Ossoff, that from Reuters, that the U.S. economy grew 5.7% in 2021. That's actually tremendous for the U.S. By the way, that's double a good year. By the way, it's the strongest year since 1984. To give you some measure, by comparison, 2020 was only 3.4, the biggest drop in 74 years. So great news for the U.S. economy and the rest of the world that trades with the United States. There you go. Thank you, Reuters, for that one. And the next one is from Poppy about quantum apocalypse and should we be scared? Security experts say a quantum computing leap could crack open all our secrets. Should we be worried? And they're talking about the quantum apocalypse, which is the idea that quantum computers can break cryptography, and it's a debated issue all over Clubhouse and Twitter Spaces all the time. So we'll spare you that lengthy conversation and debate, and you can go join those rooms at your leisure. And last but not least, Normie shares this one about why Netflix is frustrated with India. With 5.5 million subscribers, the world's biggest streamer, Netflix is lagging way behind its main rivals in India. And the obvious answer is because of the different types of content, where Indians like to watch, shock and surprise, Indian content, which Netflix is notably missing in India. And that's a rather easy mystery to solve. So
Tyler, there's another reason too, by the way.
Sure there is.
Disney owns ESPN, and they've got the IPL rights over there, so they could package that with Disney Plus, okay, and that helps them get subscriptions.
Yeah, and then Evan just found a really interesting article about the tightrope that the United Arab Emirates is trying to walk between the F-35 fighters that the U.S. is trying to sell them and the 5G networks that China is trying to sell them. And it's just, if you haven't been following that story, it's a kind of an interesting one. How the UAE is trying to balance relations between U.S. and China. I'll summarize very quickly. The U.S. is trying to sell them a bunch of F-35s. That we make a lot of money selling those. But we told them we won't sell them to you if you take China's 5G network, which you shouldn't do anyways because it's espionage, by the way, yet again. And the UAE says, you know what, we think you're bluffing. We're going to go ahead and go with Huawei for our 5G because it's half the price. So they did. And long story short, America's going to sell the F-35s anyways. So they correctly called our bluff. And it does highlight how they're trying to walk this tightrope to appease both China and the U.S., as the whole world is also being put through this rope of fire to decide which side they're going to be on when shit really gets real. And the UAE doesn't want to pick a side, understandably, nor does Thailand, by the way. And there we are. So we'll meet again tomorrow.
Tyler, one short one thing here.
Sure.
Sorry for being slow in class. I sent you a link on Twitter regarding this with the SWIFT and the possible ban of the Russian and all the countries around there. You should be aware that 44% of all money laundering operations operating over SWIFT is going through those countries as well. So this will not only impact the countries itself, this will impact all organized crime all over the world.
Okay. Thank you for that, Johan. We will meet again.
Hey, Tyler, can I just give you one more piece of data before you go? Because I to follow up on something. Disney Plus has 34 million subscribers in India. It's about a third of their global subscriber base. So that's why Netflix is having trouble in India, because everyone doesn't need to have every subscription. So Disney Plus has a tremendous position there.
Okay. Thank you for that. We'll meet again tomorrow, everybody. Thank you for joining us. There we go.
Thank you, Tyler. Thank you,
Thank you.
Jerome.
Thanks, Tyler.